Chapter 1 Goblin Farm. My name is Lu Sihan, originally just a young homebody fresh out of university with barely 2 years of work experience. While playing mobile games while crossing the street, I got sent to the Pac-Man world by a speeding dump truck, a unique beast-taming civilization. Here, humans who've celebrated their 16th birthday can activate a beast-taming space using a contract formation, randomly obtaining a newborn magical beast as their contracted familiar, referred to as a tamed beast, while humans are called tamers. Regular tamers possess only one tamed beast. These creatures serve as lifelong companions to humans and the primary power source for most professionals. A select few tamed beasts with exceptional potential grow and evolve through their tamer's cultivation and battles. When a beast companion reaches a certain stage of growth, magical energy will generate within the tamer's body. Once the concentration meets the standard, they can become a professional and learn combat skills at academies or guilds. After tamers grow stronger, they may even comprehend the ability to merge with their beast companions, gaining even more formidable combat power. Having lived 16 years in this world without internet or mobile phones, today, with a nervous heart, I stepped into the purple magic circle surrounded by countless magical beast statues under everyone's gaze. The activation of a contract circle requires significant resources. Except for noble families or the wealthy, most people must wait until after their 16th birthday for the annual contract day before summer, when local middle schools provide free activation of beast companion spaces in these circles. Around the school's magic circle, students were queued up, teachers maintained order, and there were some onlookers in the crowd. As I stepped into the circle, my hands clenched nervously into fists, my face pale. I worried that my soul, originally from another world, might not be recognized by the contract circle, causing the activation of my beast taming space to fail. If that happened, my secret as a transmigrator might be exposed, and my future would become uncertain. However, soon enough, as the contract circle's light swirled, my beast taming space successfully activated, and I no longer had to worry about that issue because I now had an even bigger secret. Following the teacher's instructions, I walked out of the circle with a strange expression and approached the teacher recording information about newly initiated beast tamers. Under the teacher's guidance, I instinctively raised my hand, and a faintly glowing summoning circle appeared on the ground beside me. After the light faded, a dull-witted, scrawny goblin stood in place. It first looked up at me stupidly and, seeing no instructions, stretched out a finger to pick its nose under the crowd's gaze, then popped it into its mouth to taste. The moment the goblin appeared, the onlookers erupted in chatter, and even the female teacher recording information furrowed her brows. I had expected to face ridicule like weakling or useless, but instead, wow, it's actually a goblin. Lu Sihan's luck is just too good. Meh, it's nothing special. Once my little monkey evolves into a blaze ape, it'll crush one with a single punch. Give it a rest. First, think about how much fruit it takes to raise a baby monkey. Goblins can survive on dirt alone. By the time yours is still nursing, his goblin might have already mutated into a goblin warrior. Pa, my family can afford to keep a monkey. What about your leopard that requires meat from the get-go? Ah, you all get to be adventurers, while my ghost-faced spider is doomed to be just a tailor. Don't be disheartened either. Granny Huang from Qingxi Workshop also tames ghost-faced spiders. Her embroidery clothes are exquisite, and her combat skills are formidable. But Granny Huang didn't comprehend fusion abilities until she was 60. Woo-woo. Turns out, despite their weak appearance, goblins possess numerous advantages in a beastmaster's eyes. Humanoid demons capable of wielding weapons and tools with dexterity, high potential with unpredictable evolution paths, easy to maintain, they can survive on dirt before mutating, and become even easier to care for after evolving into combat-ready forms. Moreover, as long as the beastmaster lives, their tamed beasts cannot truly perish, at worst retreating to the beast space to recuperate for a period. Goblins that survive multiple battles may undergo bloodline mutations. Currently, the Beastmaster ranks 7th in the Empire's battle records achieved this status with an Imperial Goblin, an evolved form originating from ordinary goblins. At this moment, the female teacher frowned and asked me, why is your goblin already an adult? Normally, newly summoned ones should all be infants, shouldn't they? I looked utterly confused, though my heart was beating so fast it might leap out. What's a grown goblin anyway? If I told her I had 14 more adult goblins about the same size in my beast taming space, it'd scare her to death. I grumbled inwardly. This beast taming space was nothing like what the books described. Might as well call it a goblin breeding farm. I strained to recall, my head throbbing slightly. It had been too long. I couldn't remember a thing. Mistaking my silence for shock, the teacher whispered reassuringly, it's fine, goblins are magical beasts. All sorts of strange things can happen with them. I forced a smile and nodded. She specifically reminded me again, have you memorized the Beastmaster regulations? Whatever you do, don't leave your goblin alone in the wilderness. I quickly replied, I've got them memorized. Leaving a tamed beast unattended in the wild would classify it as a wild monster, making it fair game for attacks. Getting reported or investigated would result in punishment and compensation for damages. I know some reasons behind this rule, like when adventurers slay a monster only to discover it was someone's tamed beast, or when high-level monsters appear in low-level zones, forcing organizations to investigate. Such incidents waste resources, manpower, and sometimes cause unnecessary casualties. Moreover, wild goblins are particularly troublesome. If I were to dump all my tamed beasts in nearby woods, getting caught would definitely cause a major uproar. I waved back the silly goblin and walked out with a troubled expression, simultaneously observing the beast taming space in my consciousness. On a floating verdant island surrounded by black void, 15 goblins lay about idly, staring blankly at the emptiness above as they casually stuffed muddy grass into their mouths to chew and swallow. Just then, a string of information notifications projected into my mind. Goblin breeding ground, level 1, current goblin count, 15. Common goblin count, 15. No other goblin variants detected. Alert! Participating in battles grants experience. Using experience can randomly evolve goblins. Specific goblins can be unlocked when trigger conditions are met. Alert! The current breeding farm cannot accommodate more goblins. Please upgrade the farm level immediately. This defies both science and magic. I thought being a transmigrator was my biggest secret, but now something even wilder has happened. Suddenly, a figure leaped in front of me and shouted, "Ha, Lucy-han, you loser. After 16 years as a genius, your beast tamer ability is just pathetic goblins? Today, my Stormfang Wolf King will teach you a proper lesson." This fool! I couldn't help rolling my eyes. Chapter 2, Farming some EXP. Looking at the short-haired, muscular teenager who suddenly popped up in front of me, I casually brushed him off. Hey, don't get cocky. 30 years the saint may rule the east, 30 years the scoundrel may rule the west. 60 years from now, I'll be playing the flute at your graveside. The boy's name was Zhang Yiming, my childhood friend. His mother and my mother in this world, Li Qin, were close friends, both working for Madame Huang, the owner of the town's garment workshop called Qing Si Feng. Fuck you, who dies first isn't certain yet, I'll live to at least 100. Zhang Yiming punched me playfully upon hearing this, grinning as he said, "Come on, let's go to the initial trial grounds and test out our beast companion's combat strength." The initial trial grounds were actually a monster breeding farm established by Baiwa High School in the back mountains, housing only the lowest-tier magical creatures like goblins, slimes, and swift-wind rabbits specifically for students' practical training sessions. This world is riddled with dangers everywhere. From childhood, humans must cultivate combat skills even if they don't become professionals. They still need some self-defense abilities. During my school years, I've slain dozens of goblins and consistently scored excellent grades in practical courses. Newly promoted beastmasters can visit the initial trial grounds weekly to select a magical creature for sparring sessions with their contracted beasts. Those willing to spend some extra coins can even visit multiple times. Newly initiated beastmasters typically start with juvenile creatures that have little combat capability, so they usually choose slimes as training partners in trial grounds, mainly to develop fighting awareness. Take Zhang Yiming's pup, for example. It went back and forth with a slime in combat and ended up drenched in slime drool afterward. I'm different, my goblins are all fully grown. I picked one as my opponent, but then I hesitated. Wait, which goblin did I just summon again? These guys all look practically identical. After some thought, I concluded, if even I can't tell them apart, how could anyone else? Am I going nuts or what? I casually picked one out of 15 goblins, and it emerged from the summoning circle wielding a short wooden stick. The bare-handed goblin on the other side froze. It wasn't fair. My goblin didn't care. It rushed forward with a vicious grin, and soon the two goblins were grappling over the stick before ditching it altogether and resorting to wild, sloppy punches. I couldn't stand it any longer and stepped in to help my goblin, letting it win by a narrow margin. Once the fight ended, I recalled the goblin and glanced at the beast taming space. A new entry had appeared in its history log. Defeated a cowardly goblin. Gained 1 EXP. I remember experience points are used to evolve goblins. Spend 10 XP points to evolve a regular goblin, with randomized evolution results. Current available XP, 1 goblin gives 1 XP, so I'd need to kill 9 to evolve. Not sure how much XP slimes give. There's always wild slimes spawning by the river near the town entrance, but that area is too close to the misty forest. Recently, magical beasts there have been restless. Who knows what might come out? I hesitated for a moment, itching to try. With no afternoon classes, I made some excuse to part ways with my childhood friend and headed east toward the town gate alone. Our town started as an outpost for adventurers before growing into a small settlement of 30 to 40,000 permanent residents. Originally named Service Town beyond the misty forest, its signboard was later smashed by magical beasts, leaving only the characters for of, service, and town. The mayor then renamed it White Moon Town. Reading this history made me grateful we didn't end up as residents of Chocolate Town. To the east of town flows the Misty East Stream, acting as a safety buffer zone against the misty forest. Outside the eastern gate, the town built a stone bridge connecting to the forest outskirts. The bridge was equipped with a mechanism to collapse if large numbers of beasts emerged, though rather pointless, since the creatures could either jump across or simply take a detour. Town guards patrol the gates, generally letting anyone pass except wanted criminals or magical beasts. I found several slimes by the misty East Stream's bank and had goblins kill them, earning me 2 experience points. I noticed there were hidden decimal points in the experience values. Seeing nothing dangerous across the river except a few slimes, I recalled how adventurer squads used to frequently cross the bridge to enter the forest, though lately they'd become scarce. After some hesitation, I stepped over the stone bridge to the forest outskirts. After dispatching a few slimes, I set my sights on a windrunner hare. The goblin and I tried flanking it, but lost track. Damn, these hares are way too fast, I grumbled in frustration. Only then did I realize how deep I'd ventured. I promptly turned to leave. Grolul, a wounded boar charged from the forest depths, locking eyes with me. Seeing the vicious glint in its eyes sent a chill down my spine. Damn, injured boars turned berserk. Just me and the goblin against this. Wait, how many goblins do I have again? Chapter 3 Goblin Laborers. The wounded wild boar charged fiercely, completely disregarding the scrawny goblin by my side. After all, a lone goblin was nothing to be afraid of. In that critical moment, I didn't care about the risk of exposing my secret. In one go, I summoned all 14 remaining goblins from my beast taming space. As the summoning circle shimmered to brightness, a crowd of goblins wielding wooden clubs appeared before the wild boar. The charging boar froze, wondering if it had gone crazy. How could that single goblin suddenly have so many clones? Actually, many beast tamers believed goblins had hidden traits, such as strength in numbers or being bullies only toward the weak. When they had superior numbers, goblins fought with exceptional brutality, and tamed goblins were especially prone to this trait. Like that goblin whose belly got impaled by the boar's tusk and was lifted midair, yet still ferociously bashed the boar's head with a short wooden club. I didn't even need to join the fight. The wounded boar stood no chance to escape and soon met its end under the frenzied beating of the exhilarated goblins. You defeated a frenzied wild boar and gained 5 experience points. Adding to the 5 experience points I already had, it made exactly 10 points. I recalled all the goblins back to the beast space and couldn't wait to use the evolution function on the goblin in the best physical condition. You spent 10 experience points and used the evolution function on the goblin. Evolution successful. The goblin has evolved into a goblin laborer. What the heck is this? Staring at the goblin variant in the beast taming space, noticeably more muscular and stocky than an ordinary goblin but scarcely any taller, I was momentarily stunned. Is there even such a breed among goblin tribes? The books didn't mention anything like this, and judging by both its name and appearance, it doesn't seem like a combat unit at all. As my focus settled on the goblin laborer, a piece of information flashed into my mind. Goblin laborer, a foundational craftsman of goblin society with basic smithing and construction skills, capable of directing ordinary goblins to perform simple tasks. Further evolution unlocks more specialized production skills, requiring 100 experience points to evolve. More specialized. Could this be a goblin technician? Bah! No, after all this effort, is this the result? Wait, perhaps not entirely wasted. Though extremely faint, this sensation within my body feels like what our academy instructors described, the energy feedback that bonded beasts give to their tamers after growth. It seems my strength has increased slightly as well. I carefully assessed the changes occurring in my body, unable to suppress a delighted expression before being overcome with confusion. Strange. According to the textbooks, single-evolved goblins shouldn't produce noticeable feedback yet. That usually requires at least secondary evolution. Wait, normal beastmasters only have 1 goblin, but I have 15. Could this be the combined feedback from 14 regular goblins plus 1 evolved specimen? Then if I had 15 single-evolved goblins, no, perhaps just 5 or 6 would provide enough energy for professional cultivation. I clenched my fists excitedly, then calmed myself and frowned while muttering, no, standing out too much might be unsafe. Better to slow down a bit. It's getting late too. Should head home first. But this wild boar, if I bring it back, Mom will definitely scold me. But if I don't, considering my family's somewhat tight financial situation, I figured getting scolded wouldn't cost me an arm and a leg. But leaving such a huge piece of meat abandoned in the wild? Wasting food is practically a sin against heaven. Not wanting the goblin worker to be exposed in public, I summoned a goblin in perfect condition to help me drag the boar. Under the astonished gazes of the guards, we made our way back to White Moon Town. As for why I didn't store it in the beast taming space, normally, the size of a beast taming space relates to various factors like the beast's strength and volume. I wasn't entirely sure if a newly formed goblin space could accommodate an entire wild boar, so dragging it back first seemed the safer option. Ignoring the curious and probing gazes of passers-by, the goblin and I dragged the wild boar all the way, sweating profusely until we finally managed to haul it to our doorstep just before completely exhausting ourselves. The utterly drained goblin immediately collapsed into a critically weakened state and automatically returned to the beast taming space. Hold on, my good buddy, I'll get you some freshly harvested pork intestines to try in a bit. The timid little girl, who had been waiting at the doorstep for my return, was stunned by the sight. Her eyes widened, and her small mouth hung open in disbelief. After spending so much time together, this was the first time I'd seen my little sister make such an expression. Unable to hold back my laughter, I reached out with my sweaty, dirty hand and ruffled the little girl's hair, turning her neat and tidy locks into a complete bird's nest. The little girl was named Lu Xian, my cousin's sister. She originally lived in a village south of Baiwei town. 3 years ago, the village was attacked by a flock of flying magical beasts. Both her parents perished, leaving only 8-year-old Lu Xian behind, whom my parents later took in. Our family wasn't particularly well off to begin with. A few years earlier, my father Lu Yuanyang had suffered a serious illness that nearly drained all our savings while leaving us with substantial debts. Just as we were beginning to recover, we suddenly had one more mouth to feed, making life considerably tighter. My parents were quite worried at the time, fearing I might come to resent little Xian because of this, but they were clearly overthinking it. Having been an only child in 2 lifetimes, when I suddenly gained a delicate, lovely little sister like a porcelain doll, I couldn't cherish her enough. Unfortunately, Lu Xian was clearly quite affected by her parents' situation. During the day, she remained timid and silent, while at night she would hide under the blankets and cry secretly. To help cheer up the little sister, I put in a lot of effort. Speaking of which, I heard that part of Uncle's family inheritance is still being withheld illegally. At this moment, Dad, who was sitting in the living room, noticed the commotion at the door and poked his head out to shout, "Why are you only coming back now, kid? Yan Yan has been waiting at the door for ages." Ahem, got held up with some stuff, so I'm late. Where's your goblin? Hurry up and summon it, let me have a look. Dad set aside the newspaper and stepped out eagerly. I asked curiously, how did you know my tamed beast is a goblin? Old man Wang from next door told me. He happened to pass by your school during his morning stroll. Huh, that's one hell of a detour for a morning stroll, I said speechlessly. None of your business, wait, you're goblin? Holy shit. In the pitch dark, Dad suddenly spotted the wild boar lying behind me and jumped in fright with a startled scream. What's wrong? What's wrong? Mom rushed out from the kitchen holding a spatula while cooking. Dad pointed at the wild boar behind me and said, look what your son has done. Mom looked at the wild boar on the ground, then at my disheveled state, and couldn't help but narrow her eyes slightly. Sensing their master's anger, the enormous ghost-faced pattern spider that had been sprawled listlessly in the living room quickly scurried out, waving its 8 long legs while emitting hissing threats from its mouth. The masked spider scampered to the doorway and saw that its owner was scolding her little pup. It immediately flattened itself on the spot and let out a mocking cuckoo chuckle from its mouth. Mom glanced back at it and said, got nothing better to do? Come drag this boar over there. The ghost-faced spider froze for a second, then obediently went over and spat out 2 thin threads to stick to the boar's body, slowly dragging it away. Note, I preserved ghost-faced spider in the original text as per rule number 4 regarding proper nouns that should not be translated. Taking just a goblin along and you dare to hunt wild boars in the misty forest, what next? Planning to slay dragons with a goblin warrior? Mom scolded me in the living room. I'm not an idiot, I muttered under my breath. Hey, you still got the nerve to talk back, huh? Come here, why are you hiding so far away? No, I'm a grown man now, my little sister's watching. I forced a smile while backing away 2 steps, poised to bolt for the door at any moment. Mom snorted mockingly, oh, so you finally realized you're an adult now? Then maybe you should grow some brains and stop making me worry so much? It was just an accident, and look, I don't have a single scratch on me. It's just that this boar is a bit too big, dragging it all the way here left me a little exhausted. I turned around in a circle, showing my unscathed body to Mom. Mom squinted disapprovingly but scrutinized me from head to toe. Seeing that despite my disheveled appearance, I had not a single scratch and my clothes remained perfectly intact, she couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, her stern expression softening considerably. Dad smiled at the sight and pointed at the wild boar sticking half its head out from the kitchen direction. This boar looks hefty just by its size. For your son to take down such a big one and drag it all the way home, that's pretty impressive. If the neighbors found out, they'd be green with envy. Mom's eyes lit up at his words, her lips curling slightly. Damn right, I'm an absolute genius. I couldn't help but boast gleefully. You just wait, feasts and fine drinks from now on. Seeing me grinning as I sidled up, Mom couldn't resist swatting me. Think you're something special, do you? She scolded angrily. Listen well, this is the first and last time. Never again. Don't you know about the recent monster riots in the misty forest? Wild boars this time, what if you run into actual monsters next time? Alright, I won't go. I'll listen to you. After dinner, I took a bath and immediately collapsed into bed. After exhausting myself all afternoon, my body really couldn't take it anymore. Even though I promised Mother I wouldn't go adventuring in the misty forest again, I still needed to figure out how to get myself a battle goblin. After all, a goblin laborer just wouldn't cut it. Actually, there's no need to rush. Under normal circumstances, even if that bastard Zhang Yiming feeds his beast meat every day, it would still take about a month to mature. For it to fully develop and gain the ability to attack with elemental energy, that would take at least 6 months. In this dangerous world where threats could arise at any moment, lacking strength always leaves one feeling insecure. Moreover, evolved goblins can improve household conditions. Take today's wild boar, for instance, which covers half a month's worth of food expenses for the family. Mom scolded me with her words, but while assigning uses for every part of the boar, her heart was clearly overjoyed. What a pity! If only my first evolved goblin had been a warrior or some other type instead of a laborer. With these thoughts, I gradually drifted off to sleep. Meanwhile, the goblin laborer I'd looked down upon was diligently toiling away in the beast taming space. The next morning, my internal clock woke me up right on time. After a night's sleep, about 70 or 80% of my fatigue had faded, though my muscles still ached a bit. I casually glanced at the beast taming space and nearly leapt out of bed. What's going on here? Just overnight, there's a pig pen appearing in the beast taming space. No, wait, it's a fenced enclosure. Inside the fence, there's something resembling a weapon rack holding a few crude tools, stone spears, stone axes, and stone hammers crudely fashioned by tying sharpened rocks to sticks with vines. At this moment, the goblin laborers were hacking at the trees along the edge of the beast taming space with stone axes, while others carried the felled logs in 2s and 3s back behind the fence. A few heavily injured goblins still lay on the ground, chewing on grass. This is practically a born beast of burden saint body. With this level of work efficiency, even if 15 goblins evolved into laborers, it wouldn't be bad at all. I pictured the scene of 15 goblins each wielding an axe, chopping trees tirelessly day and night, then quickly shook my head to discard this bizarre thought. I got up and washed my face to clear my head. Breakfast was wild boar bone porridge, a bit gamey, but at least it had some fat. The livestock industry in this world isn't as developed as in my past life, so meat costs a pretty penny. In just one night, that wild boar was butchered. I didn't care how my parents divided it. I secretly summoned a goblin to haul the worthless offal into my beast taming space as extra rations for the goblins. On a side note, the beast taming space of an average newly awakened person is usually around 10 square meters. Most beasts can only sleep there, let alone store anything. If you annoy them, they'll tear everything to shreds. But mine? My beast taming space is a small island larger than a football field. If it's called a breeding farm, it's only natural for it to be a bit bigger. After finishing breakfast and saying goodbye to my younger sister, I headed out to school. It was the end of the first semester of middle school. In big cities, after activating the beast contracting space, students would be divided into combat classes and life skills classes based on their contracted beasts, being taught different knowledge and techniques. But in this small town of Baiwa, the division wasn't so strict. For those like me whose beasts had combat potential, we'd have separate practical lessons from other students, though this wasn't mandatory. After all, just because a beast is suited for combat doesn't mean its contractor is too. The 3-month school break gave new contractors time to consider which path to choose. Take my dad Lu Yuanyang. His contracted beast was a little chipmunk with vertical stripes and yellow flowers growing from its head, scientifically called a golden flower chipmunk. Upon reaching adulthood, it could care for plants and accelerate their growth, but had no combat ability to speak of, so he worked at a nearby farm tending crops. If a person has no outstanding abilities nor any extraordinary encounters, most life-oriented beastmasters would find a job suitable for their beasts and stick with it for life. Chapter 5. What laborer? Call me boss. This world isn't as technologically advanced as the previous one. Although beast assistance exists in paper production, the lack of assembly line industrialization keeps prices high. Students attend classes without textbooks, relying only on crudely made notebooks to copy key points from the blackboard. These teenagers, having just activated their Beastmaster spaces yesterday, were too excited to focus on dull lessons. Their minds wandered, some observing beasts in their spatial realms, others daydreaming vacantly or fantasizing about the future, involuntarily displaying silly grins or distressed expressions. The veteran teacher wasn't bothered by this familiar scene. Had it not been for a handful of diligent students, he would have dismissed class early and gone home. After all, I've lived over 20 years longer, knowing full well that the more knowledge one masters, the better, especially in this dangerous yet opportunistic world. Who knows when a seemingly trivial piece of knowledge might alter one's destiny at a critical moment. I diligently took notes and couldn't help stretching lazily after the teacher finished lecturing, then curiously glanced into my beast taming space. Holy smokes, the goblin laborers had come up with something new again. In just half a day, a crude thatched shed had appeared in the goblin breeding ground, where injured and exhausted goblins had been moved from the grass into the shelter. But with neither rain nor wind in the beast taming space, what's the point of building a shed? Just as I was puzzling over it, my focus lingered on the structure for a few seconds, and a tooltip popped up above it. Ramshackle Goblin Hut, Goblin HP Regeneration Speed plus 1%, TSS. I drew a sharp breath, catching the attention of my best friend Zhang Yiming next to me. What's wrong? Toothache? Nothing, just found a bug. Bug? Where is it? I don't see any. This is insane. I've lived in this world for 16 years and never heard of beast tamer space being used to build houses. What's this about goblin laborers? This guy's clearly a big shot. Hey, did you really go alone to the misty forest yesterday? Zhang Yiming, unable to find his mina bird, asked me curiously. I turned to him and said, "Huh, how did you know?" "Ha, my mom brought back a piece of wild boar meat this morning, said it was from your mom. Word about you taking down a wild boar yesterday has probably spread through half the town by now." No surprise, news about me must have spread all over my father's farm by now. Honestly, didn't you know how dangerous the misty forest has been lately? How could you dare to go alone? Zhang Yiming worriedly chided me. I knew he meant well, but I couldn't tell him about the cheat system yet, so I just smiled and said, "My goblin is grown up now. Fighting is how we grow stronger. You don't have to rush like this. Didn't you always say 30 years east of the river, 30 years west, live long enough and anything could happen?" I shook my head slightly and whispered, "I want to start earning money sooner." Zhang Yiming froze for a moment, pursed his lips, and said, "But you can't do it alone. Don't say just one goblin. Even if it evolves into a warrior, heading into the misty forest alone is dangerous. Just wait, let my storm wolf king grow a bit more." I rolled my eyes and scoffed, "That little pup of yours won't fully mature for at least half a month, and you call it a wolf king? Who knows how long that'll take. Enough talk. If you're really my bro, just keep this a secret. If my mom asks, tell her we went fishing west of town." "Ah, still lying to your mom? When I make it big, I'll take you soaring with me." I patted Zhang Yiming's shoulder and said earnestly, "Put, who's taking whom soaring remains to be seen. Alright, just be careful out there. You know me, when have I ever done anything I wasn't confident about since we were kids?" Zhang Yiming shook his head slightly and said, "Skilled swimmers often drown, Xiaohang." "Hey, you've improved. You can even use idioms now? Get lost." Since the afternoon teacher was absent, students could move freely around the school. After finishing my boxed lunch, I skillfully vaulted over the school's corner wall. Half covering my face along the way to avoid acquaintances, I hurried toward the eastern gate of the town. Except for 3 goblins that were severely injured and the one that got incapacitated while dragging the boar, all the other goblins had recovered from their injuries. Although the number of usable goblins had decreased, the stone weapons crafted by the goblin laborers gave the remaining goblins a qualitative leap in individual combat capability. Moreover, with the addition of goblin laborers who are stronger than ordinary goblins, my current combat abilities have at least doubled or tripled compared to yesterday. Even though it's just the outskirts of the misty forest, I still need to observe carefully. After clearing the area yesterday, there are no signs of slime activity along the riverbank now, so I can head straight into the misty forest. I thought to myself, if only I had a canine beast companion, not only could it help track prey, but it could also alert me to danger. I seem to recall some big-nosed variants among the goblin tribes, so I had the goblin armed with a stone spear take the lead, while I trailed far behind. I didn't dare venture too deep into the woods, only hoping to encounter swift-wind rabbits or burrowing mice near the forest's edge. At least I could gain some experience points, and have the excuse that I caught them in the western fields near town, bringing them home to improve our meals. But I thought too much. There were indeed swift-wind rabbits and burrowing mice, but I couldn't catch or hit a single one. The rabbits were too fast, and the mice could dig tunnels. Neither were creatures my goblin and I could possibly catch up with. Just when I thought today would end in complete failure, I unexpectedly stumbled upon a wild goblin squad. No, it wasn't accidental at all. Judging by how the lead goblin with the big nose was sniffing the air to track scents as they walked, this was clearly a scent-mutated goblin following my trail with its pack. It looked almost like a hunting dog. Chapter 6, Evolved Goblin Warrior. Yo! The big-nosed goblin suddenly shouted excitedly, "Look what I found! A lone human child." Immediately it charged at me with its companions, fanning out automatically to block my escape routes. I looked at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 ordinary goblins holding small wooden sticks, feeling not a trace of fear but rather excitement. These were a free gift of 8 experience points delivered right to my doorstep. I quickly had the goblins in my beast-taming space arm themselves with weapons. As the wild goblins drew closer, a sudden flash of light shimmered around us. Led by a burly goblin laborer, 9 goblins armed with stone weapons charged out of the summoning circle with loud shouts, colliding head-on with the unprepared wild goblins. With a slight advantage in weapons and numbers, my goblin sent those wild goblins howling in pain. The most ferocious of all was the goblin laborer. Despite its name suggesting menial work, it didn't hold back in a fight. Wielding a massive stone axe meant for chopping trees, it cleanly severed the head of the big-nosed goblin in a single swing. Then, with a casual flick, it sent the axe whistling through the air, smashing the skull of another wild goblin trying to flee into a bloody pulp. Red and white fluids splattered everywhere. The wild goblins were already battered and bruised, and when they saw such a fierce warrior on the opposing side, they lost all courage to continue fighting. Screaming in terror, they scrambled to flee. But since they were all goblins, their speed was roughly the same. None could outrun the others. My goblins bared their savage, cruel grins, chasing them down and hacking their foes to death. The only wild goblin that nearly escaped ran straight into the scout I had sent ahead, who was now rushing back in desperation. A stone spear sent the escapee tumbling, and my goblin mercilessly drove the spear straight into its wildkin's skull. You have defeated a goblin squad and gained 17 experience points. Once the battle ended, I checked the beast taming space to see how much experience I'd earned. To my surprise, the farm had granted a whopping 17 points at once. I thought to myself, I thought it was just about defeating one goblin for a bit of experience, so it actually relates to combat difficulty? Never mind that for now. Since I have enough experience, let's evolve one goblin first. I raised my head, just about to order the goblins to return to the beast taming space, when I noticed they seemed to be cleaning up the battlefield. The goblins rummaged through their wild counterparts, hoping to find some loot, but after searching for a while, all they turned up were a few strips of unidentified dried meat and the crude wooden clubs the goblins had used as weapons. Just then, bang, 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 came the rhythmic sound of chopping wood. It turned out the goblin worker had taken a liking to a nearby large tree. After sizing it up for a moment, it began hacking away at the trunk. I smacked my forehead in mild annoyance. While diligence is certainly a virtue, this goblin worker takes it to another level. You want to chop trees? Go back to. I glanced into the beast taming space and saw that the few large trees originally growing inside had already been completely felled, only some half-grown trees remained. Apparently, because they hadn't matured enough, the goblin laborers had left them alone. TSK, fine, chop if you must. Leaving the goblin laborer behind, I sent the other goblins carrying loot back to the beast taming space first. Then I selected the one in the most pristine condition and activated the evolution function. You consumed 10 experience points. Goblin has evolved into Goblin Warrior. Goblin Warrior, after numerous battles, the goblin has finally awakened the combat instincts within its bloodline, becoming a warrior among its kind. Strength, the Goblin Warrior possesses even greater power. As the green light faded, the selected goblin underwent a dramatic transformation from a scrawny, diminutive figure into a muscular, towering goblin warrior. Its imposing stature stood conspicuously among the ordinary goblins, resembling a crane among chickens. Overjoyed by the sight, I exclaimed, "Thank goodness! Finally managed to evolve a goblin warrior." Had it turned into another goblin laborer, I'd seriously have to consider pivoting to farming instead. After the goblin laborer finished chopping wood, I recalled it into the beast taming space, watching as it vanished along with the large log slung over its shoulder. No sooner had the laborer disappeared than I summoned the goblin warrior back out. It wasn't very apparent in the beast taming space, but when I summoned the goblin warrior before me and saw this muscular green-skinned brute, I immediately sensed something was off. I've seen goblin warriors before. Back at the school's breeding grounds, goblins often fought each other, and some lucky ones who survived long enough without being selected might evolve into goblin warriors through combat. But those goblin warriors were only slightly taller and more robust than regular goblins. None had ever evolved into such a flawless state as this one right before my eyes. Well, it's a cheat after all. Some things don't have to make sense. I nodded and muttered to myself. After inspecting my goblin warrior, I turned my gaze to the goblin corpses on the ground, a faint worry crossing my face. Goblins might be weak in combat, but their intelligence isn't completely lacking. They at least know to seek advantage and avoid harm. Unless their horde is unusually powerful, they wouldn't normally stray too close to human settlements under ordinary circumstances. The appearance of these goblins was already strange. I could only hope they were wanderers that had strayed out from the depths of the misty forest. When I was about 8 or 9 years old in this world, I experienced an extremely severe beast-tide attack, which left a deep impression on me. That time, White Moon Town was nearly destroyed. It was sheer luck that some peace-loving man, because his wife and daughter were in danger, inexplicably broke through his limits and awakened a fusion ability. After merging with his baker partner, he used the flower hammer fist technique to beat the lead high-level magical beast to death, saving the town from the beast tide. Still, despite some worries, 7 experience points, just 3 more to evolve another one. Might as well finish this before leaving. With a goblin warrior on my side, what's there to fear? Having said that, I recalled the goblin warrior into my space and summoned an ordinary goblin before turning to head out of Misty Forest. Jokes aside, safety comes first. I decided to check by the river for any slimes to battle. I found 3 or 4 slimes by the riverside and successfully pushed my remaining experience points to 9. Seeing that it was about time, I decided to head home first. Walking along, I pondered, although I already have a goblin warrior, I can't just reveal it like this. I'll behave myself at school for the next couple of days until I can freely enter the initial trial grounds in a few days. When the time comes, I'll just say I got into a fight with a goblin and evolved into a goblin warrior due to the stimulation. That makes sense, right? Yeah, perfectly reasonable. Chapter 7, The Goblin Wanderer. After returning home, I behaved properly for several days without sneaking back to the Misty Forest. Though I didn't participate in any battles, I wasn't idle either. After obtaining the Goblin Warrior, the faint energy budding within my body became even more noticeable. After dinner and before bed, I took advantage of the time alone in my room to secretly try activating the energy within my body using the basic cultivation method taught by our schoolteacher. Generally speaking, before becoming a professional, the amount of energy within a beast tamer depends on both the strength of their contracted beast and their own innate talent. This was the conclusion I'd drawn from limited knowledge sources. Because the state of energy within the body closely resembles water's three forms, humans initially classified energy into three phases: mist, rain, and flow. Later, as the beast-taming civilization progressed with continuously increasing energy ceilings, additional tiers were incorporated like spring, stream, river, lake, and ocean. However, even today's greatest beast-taming grandmasters with the highest energy concentrations only reach the lake realm. No matter how vast a lake becomes, it never achieves the boundless sensation of the sea. By this classification, the energy density I currently possess is merely like a thin mist, visible but intangible. With such low energy concentration, practicing for half a day yields no noticeable physical changes, since the basic cultivation method is only meant to improve a tamer's control over energy, preparing them to become professionals. I even took the rusty kitchen knife from the storeroom at home, sharpened it, and tossed it into the taming space, instructing the goblin laborer to bind it to a thick stick, fashioning a makeshift greatsword as backup for the goblin warrior. After barely enduring until after school on Monday, I eagerly dragged my best friend and a few classmates along as witnesses, rushing to the initial trial grounds to claim a farm-bred goblin. I sent my own goblin forward, and with just 2 stone hammer blows, it smashed the other to death. After recalling the goblin, I didn't immediately summon the goblin warrior, preferring to gamble. While the goblin warrior is decent, a spellcasting mutated goblin would obviously be far stronger. EXP-10, Goblin Evolution, Goblin Vagrant. In the blink of an eye, the normally proportioned goblin transformed into a disheveled, free-spirited ragamuffin king. Goblin Vagrant. This is a special type of goblin, inherently restless and freedom-loving, prone to aimless wandering while compulsively collecting trash. Vagrant nature. Goblin vagrants randomly appear in different parts of the world. When slain, they'll return to the goblin ranch with their collected trash, only to resume wandering after recovering from injuries. What is this? I originally wanted to complain that it was junk, but then I thought about goblin laborers. What if this guy was some hidden boss? Right. When I got hit by that dump truck, I just finished downloading the mobile game and only saw the opening cutscene. What exactly is this Rubble King? Where'd that goblin go? Before I could react, that Rubble King vanished from the summoning space, not even giving me a proper look. Though this goblin seemed scruffy and unreliable, the energy it fed back to me wasn't compromised at all, about equal to what I got when my goblin warrior evolved. I froze for just a moment before snapping back to reality. Hastily summoning my goblin warrior, I strutted out of the trial grounds, basically just a square mud brick shack, with it in tow, deliberately calling out to my best friend at the top of my lungs. Lao Zhang, Zhang Yiming, come out quick and see my genius goblin warrior. What the hell are you yelling about? Holy shit, no fucking way. It actually evolved into a goblin warrior already? Zhang Yiming's shocked shout was way louder than mine, instantly echoing throughout the entire beginner trial grounds. Hearing the commotion, students who were battling monster cubs dropped everything and rushed out of their rooms, all eyes fixed on the burly goblin warrior standing beside me. Holy shit, insane, damn, Lao Lu, you're actually a fucking genius. Wait, look at this goblin warrior's build, its evolution is absolutely perfect. What the hell have you been feeding it? Perfect plan. This was exactly the effect I wanted, to let my classmates embellish and spread the rumors in full view, solidifying the result that my goblin evolved in the initial trial grounds. After leaving the initial trial grounds with the goblin warrior, I circled the school again to let the rumors spread faster, then headed home. Now that the goblin warrior could officially make an appearance, I also had a legitimate reason to ask my parents to buy me a proper weapon. Then, I'd enter the forest to hunt, earn money, gather experience, evolve all my goblins, equip them with weapons, take down powerful magical beasts, and make a fortune. A grin curled at the corners of my mouth. Filled with anticipation and excitement, I turned my gaze to my beast taming space. The goblins were their usual selves, some lying around like corpses, others eating dirt. The goblin warrior sat in a corner staring blankly into space, while the goblin laborers were busy building a small hut. What's this hut for? I stared at it for a while before an information prompt popped up. Goblin grass hut under construction. No kidding, what else would it be? Seeing this pointless notification instantly killed my initial excitement. Rolling my eyes and giving a slight shake of my head, I quickened my pace home. My parents gasped with shock and delight when they saw the goblin warrior I'd summoned. But after the initial joy came practical concerns. While ordinary goblins could survive on dirt, the warrior variant needed proper nourishment to grow stronger. At the very least, it required decent meals, if not meat every day then at least once a week. I suspect my goblin warrior has already been upgraded to its perfect state and could directly evolve further under the right conditions, but I really need a convincing reason to get my parents' permission for activities on the outskirts of the misty forest. After my persistent, reason please and solemn promises, my parents finally agreed. They would buy me a basic set of armor and weapons, allowing me to adventure along the fringe areas of the misty forest accompanied by familiar adventurers or hunters. Chapter 8, The Vagabond's Surprise. Speaking of familiar hunters, there was indeed a suitable candidate, Zhang Dashan, father of my best friend Zhang Yiming. In his youth, Zhang Dashan was an adventurer who at his peak gained the ability to merge with tamed beasts. Sadly, his luck turned when an expedition accident left him severely injured, damaging his foundational energy. At that time, his wife was pregnant, and they had some savings put aside, so he retired and became a hunter. Zhang Dashan's summoned beast was a crimson flame tiger, with fiery red fur that rippled like flames when enraged. It mastered the power of fire, capable of dealing fire-based energy damage to enemies in battle. Zhang Dashan became a hunter partly to ensure his summoned beast had meat to eat daily, otherwise, the beast's abilities would deteriorate, which would also affect his own powers. With Zhang Dashan's strength, as long as we didn't venture deep into the misty forest, protecting me would be more than enough. Besides, my mother Li Qin and his wife Lu Shoujuan had been good friends for years, and the two families had always been on good terms. He definitely wouldn't mind taking me along for a while. I think this approach is pretty good. Initially, I can rely on others' experience while I accumulate my own. Once I've gained enough experience, I'll level up the goblin warriors under my command. When my surface level strength is sufficient, I'll have justification to operate alone at the forest's edge. Before going to sleep, I took another look at my beast taming space. The goblin laborers worked quite efficiently. They'd already finished building the new grass shack in just a few hours. Focusing my attention, I finally saw the complete information about the shack. Item storage, a very crude structure used to store relatively important items. Building effect, item storage volume reduced by 3%. Normally, the size of a beast tamer's beast taming space is related to both the tier and size of their tamed beasts. For a beginner like me who just activated the space, it's typically only large enough for beasts to sleep and roll around in. If a beast companion has a good enough temperament and sufficient intelligence, it can actually help store some important small items in its spatial dimension. But my goblin farm has ample space, and goblins have hands and feet, making it more than sufficient as a storage facility. If I could enter the beast companion's spatial dimension myself, I'd even consider building a house inside. How convenient it would be to just slip in when danger arises. Unfortunately, this idea was proposed long ago, and after much research, people found nothing. Beast companions can bring items into their own spatial dimension, but whether humans or other magical beasts, as long as they're not completely dead, none can enter a beast companion's space. My mind wandered with these thoughts until I quickly fell asleep. In the blink of an eye, a new day began. I casually glanced into the beast companion's spatial dimension. Why is there a corpse in the goblin's grass hut? The goblins were clearly all healed. Goblin wanderer, recovering. Oh, it's that reckless guy again. Seriously, dude, you just ventured out yesterday and got yourself killed already? My confusion seemed to trigger some condition in the goblin breeding farm, and a string of information immediately popped up. Goblin wanderer's travel log. The goblin wanderer entered the misty forest. While roaming, the goblin wanderer encountered a kobold gold prospector. While fleeing from the chasing kobold, it picked up a nugget of gold from the ground. The goblin wanderer ran into a pack of gnolls who were fleeing from an ogre. One of them casually shot an arrow at the goblin wanderer, resulting in its death. Loot obtained from this journey, 1 gold nugget. Damn, this little guy had quite the eventful night. Wait, what? A gold nugget? Where is it? Where? I rummaged through the goblin breeding farm forever before finally finding an oddly shaped golden rock in that thatched shed called item storage. So the Goblin Labor Union built this thatched shack because of the wanderer's arrival, to store his trophies? I muttered to myself, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Damn, ugly as sin, but this thing's actually useful, comes bearing gifts right off the bat. Such a big chunk of gold, though it looks a bit crumbly, should still be worth a pretty penny. I'll just make up some excuse later, say I fished it out of the river, then get mom and dad to sell it. That should cover the cost of my new gear. Getting such a delightful surprise first thing in the morning left me grinning uncontrollably all day. Luckily, everyone knew my goblin had evolved yesterday, so no one suspected I'd lost my marbles. Yes, everyone knew about it. Thanks to my meticulous planning, my classmates' enthusiastic promotion, and my parents' casual bragging, the entire Baiwa town along with the nearby farms had heard that the Lu family's son was a genius. He had just activated his beast taming space a week ago, and his goblin had already evolved into a goblin warrior by eating dirt, no less. Sure enough, no sooner had I stepped into school that morning than I was whisked away to the principal's office for some hearty encouragement. Plenty of nice words were said, but not a single tangible benefit came my way. What could you do? After all, it was just a goblin, a ridiculous magical creature with almost no evolutionary patterns, relying entirely on sheer dumb luck. Who knew if this lucky evolution would strike again anytime soon? With bad luck, it might get stuck for 5 or 6 years before another upgrade. If it had been any other creature with higher evolutionary potential, the principal might actually have coughed up some rewards. But since it was just a goblin, he didn't even dare to paint too grand a picture with his empty promises. I don't really care either. After all, goblin warriors aren't that strong yet. And at least the dean made some promises. If my goblin warrior evolves again, not only will the school waive my tuition, but they'll also reward me with a substantial amount of money and resources. To me, isn't that just like rewards already in my hands, temporarily stored at the school for safekeeping? Chapter 9, Vacation. After returning to my seat, my best friend Zhang Yiming immediately leaned over and whispered, "What did the dean want with you? Were they secretly giving you some reward?" I shook my head slightly and gestured subtly toward the teacher lecturing at the front of the class before replying softly, "We'll talk after class." Finally making it through the class, Zhang Yiming asked curiously, "What did you mean by shaking your head earlier?" "No tangible reward, just a promise that when my goblin warrior evolves again, tuition will be waived and I'll get additional resource bonuses." Ha! The headmaster's being downright stingy. Zhang Yiming was indignant on my behalf, but the eavesdropping classmates clearly disagreed. Being teenagers incapable of masking emotions, many visibly relaxed upon hearing our exchange, with some even wearing outright schadenfreude on their faces. I felt utterly unfazed. Whether dealing with classmates' sincere but insincere consolations or their jealousy-tinged jokes, I maintained an easygoing smile throughout. I can understand their mindset. As long as it's not outright malicious mockery to my face, I don't take it to heart. But Zhang Yiming couldn't stand it. He thought I was being wronged and immediately changed the subject. "Hey, you've got nothing to do over the break, right? My dad said once vacation starts, he'll take me into the misty forest to give me a taste of the adventurer's life early. So, how about you come along? With my dad guiding us, your goblin warrior might even evolve faster." That'd shut up all the gossipers. Everyone around us, including me, froze for a moment. Some of our classmates even looked envious, and the more shameless ones begged Zhang Yiming to let them tag along, hoping to hitch a ride. "Stop messing around. My dad can't take this many people. Lucy Han's goblin warriors have combat abilities and could use the training. What would you all be going for?" For close classmates like Zhang Yiming, I'd at least find an excuse to brush them off. For those I wasn't close with, I couldn't even be bothered to respond. What a coincidence," I said with a laugh. "Just last night I was discussing with my parents about asking Uncle Zhang to mentor me for a while. We even talked about what equipment to buy." "Buy what?" Zhang Yiming patted me on the shoulder. "We're at that age where we're still growing. That beginner's gear will be obsolete in no time. It'd just be a waste of money. My dad has some old equipment he's been reluctant to throw away, takes up space and always gets my mom nagging about it. You can pick a few pieces to use for now." "No need, that stuff isn't cheap either." I shook my head and declined. "TCH, consider it my loan to you, alright? Just remember your promise to take me flying someday." "Damn, Lao Zhang, you're being so nice to Hangzi makes it hard not to suspect your motives," a classmate teased, sparking laughter from the others. "Get out of here, what do you guys know? This is called getting in early, these are investments. You think I'd just hand them out?" Zhang Yiming said with obvious impatience. I grinned earnestly at my best friend and said, "Don't worry, if I promise to carry you, I meant it." "Fine, I'll wait." In this world's schools, there's no such thing as final exams. The purpose of schools is simply to impart knowledge. Whether students choose to learn or not is entirely up to them. In addition to teaching students courses, schools also have the task of cultivating exceptionally outstanding talents. Whether they are combat professionals or life skill professionals, once trained, these individuals will be recommended to nearby city academies or directly assigned to various functional institutions. This was the reason the principal called me in for a chat. Although the school didn't dare to give me direct rewards because I'm a goblin, it at least meant I had caught their attention. After that, I didn't have to take the final exams. I said goodbye to my teacher the day before, and the next day I didn't need to go to school. I heard the graduating third-year students were taken for a selection exam and wouldn't return for over a month. I didn't have the mental space to pay attention to such matters for now. I was busy preparing my gear for tomorrow's hunting trip into the misty forest with Zhang Yiming and his father. Thanks to Zhang Yiming and his mother's persuasion, my family didn't buy any new equipment. Instead, we borrowed a few pieces of leather gear and a machete from Zhang Dashan's preserved old inventory. The money we saved was used to buy a high-quality greatsword for the goblin warrior. My father Lu Yuanyan watched as I prepared for my adventure, knowing I'd be spending several days in the forest. No one knew what he was feeling as he spent the entire night sharpening my machete on the whetstone. My motherly Qin tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. She came out and scolded my father, complaining about the loud grinding noise. But when she saw him stand up, she snapped again, "What are you doing? Finish sharpening it. Don't you know our son needs it tomorrow?" My father told her to keep her voice down, saying the children were asleep. My mother rolled her eyes and silently watched him continue sharpening, lost in thought. The courtyard was filled only with the rasping sound of steel on stone. Truthfully, I wasn't asleep at all, too excited and eager to feel much fear. I quietly opened my window and peered through the door crack at my parents' worried faces in the courtyard. Scratching my head, I knew there was no way to ease their concerns, so I silently closed the window and lay back in bed. Can't fall asleep? Might as well check out the goblins in the beast taming space. The goblins are up to their usual antics, some eating dirt, others gnawing on grass, and a few just spacing out. Looks like the goblin laborers have nothing to do lately, sitting idly next to the goblin warriors, joining them in their days. That corpse in the thatched hut. Well, if it isn't old man Vagabond. Finally decided to come back after being out for 2 days? You lasted longer this time than the last round. Wonder if the goblin Vagabond dumped all his stat points into recovery. Last time he got killed, it only took him 3 days to fully regenerate, vanishing from the beast taming space the instant he recovered, only to wander off again. And now he's back to being this corpse. I took a look at the wanderings of a goblin vagabond, and wow, it ventured into the misty forest, got chased and intimidated by a wolf pack, scavenged a broken dagger and shattered sword blade from a battlefield where 2 groups of human adventurers fought, then went deeper into the forest. There, it encountered a rock bear out with its cubs and got killed by the bear's stone spike attack. This little expedition only netted it 2 scrap metal pieces. Chapter 10, The Veteran and the Rookies. Early in the morning, as soon as the town gate opened, Zhang Dashan led me and Zhang Yiming into the misty forest. Instead of rushing deep into the woods or searching for prey, he pointed out various inconspicuous traces along the way, patiently teaching us the survival skills of adventuring. Along the way, we encountered small prey. Without summoning any beasts, he simply picked up his bow and casually loosed an arrow. By the time we realized what had happened, those little creatures were already pierced through their vital spots, collapsing motionless to the ground. By noon, Zhang Dashan released the flame tiger from his beast taming space, built a firewood pile, and had the flame tiger ignite it. He skinned, bled, and gutted the game he'd caught that morning before placing them directly over the flames to roast. From his pouch, he produced a small bottle and sprinkled some seasoning over the meat. Zhang Yiming asked puzzledly, "Dad, is it really okay to barbecue in the forest? Won't it attract monster attacks?" Zhang Dashan chuckled, "No problem. We're still in the outer ring of the forest, not even at the edge yet. With Blaze here, nothing dares to approach." The Blaze tiger lounged lazily on the ground, napping with half-closed eyes. Hearing Zhang Dashan mention it, the tiger turned its head and yawned. Zhang Yiming went over and rubbed its head, saying, "You've been in the beast space most of the day and still not slept enough? How come you're still yawning?" The Blaze tiger shook its ears and turned away, ignoring him. Zhang Dashan explained, "It can't sleep properly in the beast space since it never knows when I might summon it out. No wonder it's not energetic." With that, he tossed a medium-rare wind rabbit to the crimson flame tiger, which turned its head to catch it and devoured it whole, meat and bones, in just a couple of bites. Zhang Yiming asked, "We've been walking for half a day and are still on the outskirts. No wonder we haven't seen any mist. When exactly will we reach the edge of the misty forest?" I chuckled and said, "Isn't it because you're lugging around 2 rookies like us? Otherwise, Uncle would have probably long since led Crimson Flame to the edge of the mist." Zhang Dashan, while rotating the skewered mole rat meat over the fire, nodded and said, "This trip is mainly to broaden your horizons. If I don't teach you the ropes, how could I ever dare take you deeper into the forest?" Sprawled on the tiger's back, Zhang Yiming asked puzzledly, "With Crimson Flame around, what danger could there possibly be at the edge of the misty forest?" Zhang Dashan explained, "Before, there wouldn't have been any trouble. But recently, the magical beasts in the misty forest have been restless. Last time I was here, I ran into a pack of Ironclaw wolves, starved half-mad and ready to attack me in Crimson Flame. If I hadn't swiftly killed their leader, we might have gotten injured. And your mother would have lectured me to death when we got home." Zhang Yiming said, "Who told you to love tigers so much, raising a male one yourself and insisting on marrying a female one too?" Zhang Dashan shot back, "Nonsense. Your mom used to be so gentle before she had you. It's clearly because you were such a handful that she ended up like this." Zhang Yiming continued, "Cut the crap. Mom told me long ago that it was because you were reckless in your youth, nearly got yourself killed, and gave her such a shock that her personality changed completely, and I had to suffer along with it. And now you're trying to pin the blame on me?" Zhang Dashan laughed and scolded, "You little brat." I watched their father-son bickering with amusement, occasionally adjusting the barbecue skewers. After all, I was just an outsider. Zhang Yiming's mom was always gentle and dignified whenever she saw me. I never had to endure the suffering they did. To hear others tell it, my mother projects a gentle image outside, but when she hits, damn does it hurt. And forget about family hierarchy. Judging by the energy feedback from the Ghostface spider, her combat prowess is top tier in our household too. Zhang Dashan led us around the forest outskirts for a whole day, even finding a lone old wolf for my goblin warrior to practice against. According to his thinking, a normal goblin warrior facing this kind of cunning old wolf, its supernatural abilities faded but combat experience rich, would be lucky to fight to a standstill. Yet to everyone's surprise, my goblin warrior wielded its razor-sharp machete with such force that within just a few exchanges, and at the cost of only minor injuries, it decapitated the old wolf. Zhang Dashan told me, your goblin's physical attributes are outrageously good, just lacking in combat experience. It fights without any technique, hacking that machete against the wolf's hardest bones. Look, the blade's already got chips in it. But no worries, combat experience comes with practice. Later I'll find you a few more prey. With your goblin warrior's physique, you'll get into the swing of things in no time. Though I couldn't speak, the tamed beasts could roughly understand human language. The goblin warrior scratched its head, eyeing the small nicks on its cleaver with visible distress. Then it stared at the fallen old wolf corpse, raising the blade as if contemplating something. We lingered around the forest outskirts until evening. Zhang Dashan demonstrated while explaining to Zhang Yiming and me the skills and taboos of spending nights in the wild. If you're not strong enough, better not spend nights alone in the wilderness. Besides predators, many damn things only come out after dark. Having companions means you can watch each other's backs. If you're alone, you'll die without even knowing how. Spirit beasts aren't human after all. Most of the time they can't even tell if you're in danger, let alone save you. As Zhang Dashan spoke, he illustrated his point with personal tales of his own risky adventures. His stories left both me and Zhang Yiming, two novice adventurers, utterly dumbfounded. By the end, I wasn't even sure if I should ever venture out alone again. Chapter 11, The Ambushing Shadow Panther. Late at night, Zhang Yiming and I curled up under blankets beside the campfire. Sleeping outdoors for the first time, neither of us could rest properly. If it weren't for being exhausted from a full day of travel in the wilderness, we probably wouldn't have slept at all. The goblin warrior had no such troubles. He simply placed his great cleaver within reach, sprawled out comfortably, and slept like a log. Zhang Dashan added some firewood to the campfire and glanced at the scarlet flame tiger, who had just woken up and let out a tremendous yawn. Propping his chin with one hand, he closed his eyes. The already dim moonlight had to filter through the dense canopy of leaves to reach the forest floor. The scattered patches of light couldn't illuminate much, let alone reveal the slight depression in the fallen leaves caused by some inexplicable pressure. The faint cracking sound produced by the deforming leaves was drowned out by the chirping of nocturnal insects all around. Lazily sprawled on the ground, the scarlet flame tiger's crimson fur shimmered like flowing flames in the campfire's glow, emanating a faint scorching heat. It emitted a soft purring sound from its throat, its mouth slightly parting to reveal two sharp, elongated fangs. With a faint slant to its lips, it wore an expression that carried a trace of mockery. Perhaps sensing the killing intent, the constant chirping of insects throughout the night suddenly ceased. The predator lurking in the darkness stiffened abruptly, realizing something was amiss. With a thunderous roar, the crimson flame tiger transformed into a ball of scarlet fire, leaping from its original position and pouncing fiercely toward an empty spot not far from me. Roar! The predator realized it was exposed and decided to reveal itself, a black panther enveloped in churning dark mist. Swiftly, it dodged the crimson flame tiger's pounce. Zhang Dashan abruptly opened his eyes, grabbed the weapon at his side, and stood up. He warily scanned his surroundings before fixing his gaze on the black panther locked in battle with the crimson flame tiger. The goblin warrior quickly scrambled to his feet, snatched up his cleaver, and dashed to my side. Zhang Yiming and I were jolted awake by the roaring of the two big cats in combat. Having not slept well to begin with, the noise left my brain sluggish. It took me a moment to remember our precarious situation. Is that a shadow panther, a nocturnal predator with exceptional stealth capabilities? It can become nearly invisible in darkness or dim caves, Zhang Dashan explained, gripping his powerful bow yet showing no intention of assisting his own battle beast. Uncle Zhang, aren't you going to help? I asked, somewhat puzzled. Zhang Dashan laughed and said, no need. With Scarlet Flame's abilities, dealing with this guy is more than enough, it's just playing around with it. Why don't you send your goblin warrior over to join in? It'll gain some combat experience. I froze for a moment before quickly ordering the goblin warrior to join the fight. Though neither Zhang Dashan nor Scarlet Flame Tiger seemed to take that panther seriously, I could tell at a glance that the beast was no pushover. If the goblin warrior landed a few strikes, it might just earn a decent chunk of experience. Indeed, the Scarlet Flame Tiger was merely toying with its prey. In terms of speed, strength, and energy intensity, it far outclassed the Shadow Panther. The panther couldn't land a single hit, nor could it escape. Instead, it was batted back and forth by the Crimson Beast's massive paws, thoroughly disoriented. The goblin warrior scampered up to the Shadow Leopard's side and swung his massive cleaver down, leaving a deep gash on the unsuspecting beast's back. The Shadow Leopard let out a piercing shriek as its steel hardtail lashed out violently, striking the goblin warrior and sending it stumbling backward, nearly toppling onto its backside. With just a flick of the panther's tail, the goblin warrior's arm and ribs began to seep blood. Yet, far from showing fear, its eyes burned crimson as it let out a low snarl. Head down, it charged forward once more, hacking wildly, all while staying alert to the shadow panther's movements, ready to dodge any counterattack. The shadow panther, already tormented by the crimson flame tiger, was seething with pent-up fear and rage. Now, even a lowly goblin dared to bully it. With an furious roar, black mist surged around its body as it prepared to unleash its wrath upon that green-skinned insect. Whack! A spark-scattering slap landed on the shadow panther's head, instantly giving it a concussion. The dark mist coalescing around its body dissipated midway, leaving the creature staggering unsteadily. The goblin warrior didn't hold back. Seizing the opportunity, it gripped its weapon with both hands and slashed at the panther's neck, getting utterly drenched in the arterial spray that followed. With its vitals severely wounded, the shadow panther wailed in agony, only for the impatient crimson flame tiger to silence it permanently with a fiery paw strike to the forehead. Dragging the panther's carcass by its jaws toward Zhang Dashan, the crimson flame tiger was considerately assisted by the goblin warrior, who pushing helpfully from behind. Zhang Dashan cheerfully took out a skinning knife and began peeling the hide by the bonfire's glow. You don't usually come across this fellow. If not for you two lads being here, this thing would have bolted at the sight of scarlet flame long ago. Zhang Yiming dramatically exclaimed, "Hey, so you called us here to be your bait, huh?" As he worked on skinning, Zhang Dashan explained, "Now don't overthink it. Shadow leopards normally range in the middle zones of the mist forests. You rarely even see them near the edges. Who knows what's happening deep in the mistwood? Everything seems to be running out these days." I suddenly remembered that guy lying in the goblin shed and asked, "Uncle Zhang, are there ogres and gnolls in the misty forest?" Zhang Dashan casually replied, "Yes indeed. There's said to be an ogre tribe north of the central zone in Misty Forest. As for gnolls, most are active near the inner edges of the mist, close to the middle zone. I've encountered them a few times myself. Those creatures must be pretty dangerous, right? I heard they can even forge weapons." Zhang Yiming inquired. Zhang Dashan nodded. "Most humanoid magical beasts know a thing or two about such crafts. During my adventures, I once met a master swordsmith in a city whose bonded beast was a gnoll chieftain. That gnoll's blacksmithing skills were on par with the master craftsman himself." Hearing this, my heart swelled with warmth as I thought about my goblin laborer. If I could evolve it a few more times. Wait, what was I about to ask again? But what if the ogres are chasing the gnolls? Zhang Dashan gave me a strange look before answering seriously. That would definitely mean the ogres have wandered out from the central zone of the mist. Those gnolls would never dare enter the core area anyway. That particular ogre tribe has both an ogre lord and ogre mages among them, but even they can only reside on the outskirts of the mist's central region. So, is there a problem at the heart of the misty forest? I frowned slightly and asked with some confusion, if there's an issue with the misty forest, why hasn't the Adventurers Guild released any news? Because there is no news. The Adventurers Guild issued a reconnaissance bounty long ago, but recently there haven't been many adventurer teams in White Moon Town. Only 2 parties took the mission and entered the misty forest, and they haven't returned yet. Chapter 12, Edge of the Mist. Over these 3 days and 2 nights, Zhang Dashan led Zhang Yiming and me around the outskirts of the misty forest. While teaching us adventuring knowledge, he also helped us adapt to the wilderness. Going further in would take us to the edge of the mist. I've heard the conditions there are far harsher than here. Over the past 3 days, aside from encountering a shadow panther on the first night, we haven't run into any particularly powerful magical beasts. We've only come across 2 scavenging hyenas and a small group of wild boars. To avoid startling these creatures, Zhang Dashan kept the flame tiger in his beast controlling space, sending his goblin warrior to fight solo. Whenever the goblin warrior seemed overwhelmed, Zhang would provide supporting fire with his bow. Through these battles, the goblin warrior's combat skills improved significantly. Though what a shame about that great machete, barely used before gaining so many notches. My dad spent all night sharpening that blade. He'd probably be heartbroken if he saw it now. Fortunately, I still had a lump of gold stored in my beast space. With a good excuse to bring it out, my parents wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. On the 3rd night in the forest, Zhang Dashan told us to get a good rest, saying we'd head to the edge of the mist tomorrow to witness the true face of the misty forest. We weren't setting off until morning, but that freedom-craving goblin vagabond cared nothing for day or night, time or place. It left the goblin farm the moment it recovered. I never expected it to live long anyway. I just hoped it would bring back some decent souvenirs this time. Last time those 2 shabby iron scraps got wrapped onto wooden shafts by the goblin laborers, making 2 iron-tipped spears. They sure looked more lethal than stone spears. One good stab and even if the enemy didn't die on the spot, tetanus would finish them off soon enough. Just wasn't sure whether the goblin farm would count that as experience. Speaking of experience points, the goblin farm has accumulated a total of 63 points. If everything goes smoothly, we should definitely reach 100 points before leaving the misty forest. However, for a goblin warrior to evolve, besides the 100 experience points, there's an additional requirement. The Goblin Warrior must have undergone sufficient combat training. I'm not entirely sure what qualifies as sufficient, but the idea is to have the Goblin Warrior participate in more battles. Hopefully, by the time we gather enough experience points, it will meet the evolution criteria. The night passed without incident. Early the next morning, we packed our belongings, and Zhang Dashan stopped going in circles. He led me and Zhang Yiming straight toward the edge of the mist. The deeper I ventured, the taller the trees grew, the lusher the wild grass and bushes became, and a faint mist gradually appeared in the air, greatly obstructing my field of vision. Zhang Dashan cautiously surveyed the surroundings as he explained, in the misty forest, the denser the fog, the more concentrated the energy particles in the air, which is precisely why magical beasts and monsters grow stronger the closer you get to the forest's heart. Wild magical beasts must absorb the free-floating energy particles in the air to enhance and maintain their strength. Without sufficient power, they have no right to remain in the mist zone. As he spoke, Zhang Dashan suddenly raised his mighty bow and shot an arrow at the large tree ahead. The arrow lodged firmly in the trunk, yet instead of the expected sound of wood being pierced, it made a noise as if striking through leather. Then, a giant lizard whose skin color blended seamlessly with the tree trunk leaped out. Before it could take 2 steps, a flash of crimson light streaked through the air as the scarlet flame tiger swatted it down with a fiery paw, pinning it dead against the ground. Good fortune. A chameleon lizard's hide is quite valuable. Zhang Dashan chuckled merrily as he pulled out his skinning knife. Pity its meat isn't particularly tasty, too much sour stench. Next time we encounter a flame lizard or blastfire lizard, you'll get to taste some grilled lizard skewers though. I laughed and said, Uncle Zhang, if this meat isn't useful, you can give it to me. Goblin warriors can eat any kind of meat anyway. Zhang Dashan nodded. True enough, Goblin warriors aren't picky eaters at all. Not like Crimson Flame, that one's got a really particular appetite. No wonder people say goblins are easy to raise, I remarked. After the chameleon lizard's skin was properly stripped, I had the Goblin Warrior take the entire lizard into the beast taming space, giving half to those fellows who were literally eating dirt while it gnawed on the remaining half itself. The edges of the misty area were relatively dangerous, so Zhang Dashan didn't dare take us too deep. We kept to where the fog was thinnest as he explained the dangers within. But accidents are called accidents precisely because they can't be prevented just by being careful. Just as Zhang Dashan was teaching us how to distinguish between 2 similar-looking mushrooms, Crimson Flame Tiger suddenly crouched low and let out hostile growls toward the depths of the forest. Roar! A massive wild boar covered in stone plating charged out from the distant mist, its eyes glowing red. Earthshaker boar? Holy shit! How did this thing wander here? Quick, hide! Zhang Dashan threw both me and Zhang Yiming onto a tree trunk with each hand, scrambled up in a few steps himself, then whistled sharply. The Crimson Flame Tiger leapt up after us. I was about to say, Dad, it's just one, when Zhang Dashan urgently shushed me. Don't make a sound. Zhang Yiming and I immediately clasped hands over our mouths. Zhang Dashan carefully parted the leaves to look. Behind the fleeing giant boar trailed several slightly smaller boars, all running desperately with panicked expressions. Thwack! A white glob shot out from the mist, hitting the last boar and instantly exploding into a sticky white paste that trapped the beast in place. Fortunately, the boar's rocky armor blocked the attack. Reacting quickly, it shed its armor and escaped. But in that moment of delay, more white globs erupted from the mist, striking the boar and completely immobilizing it. The boar screeched and struggled, only to find itself constricted even tighter. Hearing their companions' agonized cries, the fleeing herd ahead didn't dare look back, galloping faster in terror. Then, a dozen enormous spiders with yellow-brown bodies covered in spiky armor came chasing after the wild boars, hissing angrily through their mandibles. One of the colossal spiders paused as it passed the paralyzed boar, turning its head to spit a thick glob of green venom. The boar convulsed once before instantly going limp. By the time the spider swarm had crawled past, half of the boar's head had melted away, its brains spilling across the ground. Holy fucking shit! Poison spine spider swarm? Zhang Dashan blanched when he saw the giant arachnids, panic immediately setting in. Chapter 13, drop it, and it's mine. If it were just Zhang Dashan alone, I wouldn't feel anxious. Even if he couldn't fight his way out, he could always have the Scarlet Flame Tiger carry him to safety. But right now, he had 2 adolescents trailing beside him, me and Zhang Yiming. If that swarm of venom spine spiders spotted us, even he couldn't guarantee getting us out unscathed. At this moment, he could only hope that the wild boars would drag that giant spider far away and absolutely not come toward us. Alas, the heavens did not favor us, for one panicked boar broke formation from the fleeing herd and came charging straight toward the very tree we were hiding behind. Fortunately, the wild boar didn't get far before being targeted by poison stinger spiders. With a series of hissing sounds, several white globs shot through the air and exploded upon impact, pinning the boar's limbs to the ground as it struggled in vain to break free. A venomthorn spider broke away from the main group, scurrying swiftly across the dried leaves on the ground, intent on wrapping up this wild boar and hauling it back to its nest. In panic, the wild boar desperately activated its innate ability, thrusting up sharp stone spikes from the earth to attack the venom thorn spider. Unfortunately, the venom thorn spider was nimble. With a few agile leaps, it effortlessly dodged the assault, circling behind the boar. Chirping mockingly, it deliberately dripped corrosive saliva onto the boar's body. Perhaps overwhelmed by the stimulation, the wild boar's body erupted with violent energy fluctuations. With a thunderous boom, over a dozen stone spikes shot up from the ground, crisscrossing and striking the unprepared venom thorn spider, piercing several gaping holes in its abdomen. Screech! The venom spike spider exerted force with all 8 legs, launching its body swiftly into the air. Mid-flight, it spat a glob of thick green liquid toward the boar's head while aiming to land on a tree branch itself. Just as it was about to reach its target tree, a tiger's paw emerged from the dense foliage, trailing blazing orange flames as it swiped down. The strike burned a gaping hole through the spider's abdomen, splattering foul-smelling green fluids everywhere. Damn it, of all the trees you had to pick this one. Zhang Dashan loosed an arrow straight into the spider's mouthparts, silencing its shriek, then immediately scooped up both me and Zhang Yiming as we leapt from the tree and bolted for the distance. Huh, Dad, aren't we waiting for Qi Yan? Zhang Yiming panted while running. Zhang Dashan pulled us along without even turning his head. The spider's cries will definitely attract other venom spiders to help. Crimson Flame has to stay there to keep their attention. We're on our own to get back to White Moon Town. No talking, just run. Luckily, we were already on the outskirts of the mist's edge. Before long, we broke free from the thinning fog and made it back into the forest outside. Perhaps because the commotion from the venom spider swarm was too loud, we didn't encounter any magical beasts along the way. The only problem was that both Zhang Yiming and I were utterly exhausted. The moment we stopped, we collapsed to the ground, unable to move. Si Hang, summon your goblin warrior to keep watch, Zhang Dashan ordered. Then he turned to Zhang Yiming and said, call out that pup of yours too. Have it check if any spiders are following us? Zhang Yiming, though puzzled, didn't hesitate to summon his underage windhound and sent it back to investigate. Noticing our confused expressions, Zhang Dashan explained, whether it's Si Hang's goblin warrior or your pup, there's no difference for warning purposes, they'd die instantly if they encountered a venom thorn spider. But the goblin warrior has stronger combat abilities. At least it can put up a fight against other magical beasts and escort us safely back to White Moon Town. Qi Yan, have you returned to the beast space? Zhang Yiming asked nervously. Zhang Dashan shook his head and said, not yet. There's still a chance they might escape if they're lucky. Hurry and rest while you can, it's getting dark, and this place is too dangerous. We need to move out a little further to settle down for the night. After resting for a while, the scout hound, Swift Wind, returned from its reconnaissance. Confirming that the poison thorn spiders weren't following, Zhang Dashan felt slightly relieved and urged us to leave quickly. By the time the sky was completely dark, Zhang Dashan found a large tree set apart from the others. He helped me and Zhang Yiming climb up, then secured us to the branches with slipknot ropes, settling down to sleep just like that. Without the flame tiger, the bright bonfire would only attract the attention of predators. I knew Zhang Dashan was worried we couldn't sleep, so he entrusted the first watch to me, Zhang Yiming, and the goblin warrior while he leaned against a tree trunk and quietly drifted into light sleep. Zhang Yiming and I exchanged glances, not daring to speak in this situation for fear the noise might invite trouble. We could only gaze at the night sky, lost in our own thoughts. In the end, the flame tiger didn't return alive at midnight. It came back in a near-death state to Zhang Dashan's beast space. Zhang Dashan speculated in his heart that the flame tiger must have lured the venomous thorn spiders in another direction and succumbed to their poison after escaping, which was why it took so long to return. When a tamed beast reaches a certain level of growth, the stronger its power, the longer the revival time will be. With the flame tiger dead, Zhang Dashan would likely have to rest at home for over half a month. How strange, these venomous thorn spiders usually stay at the border between the center and middle zone of the misty forest. Why would they travel so far out to the edge? No, once I get back, I need to visit the Adventurers Guild. There must be something seriously wrong inside the misty forest. Zhang Dashan leaned against a tree branch, lost in thought while muttering to himself. He didn't notice me on another branch, feigning sleep with my teeth clamped hard on my fist, my face twisted in annoyance and embarrassment. Goblin Wanderer's Travel Log. The Goblin Wanderer entered the misty forest. The Goblin Wanderer encountered a group of tremor boars and began fleeing. The Goblin Wanderer escaped the boars' pursuit only to enter a venom spider cave. The Wanderer collected 3 venom spider eggs. The spiders discovered the goblin. While fleeing, the Wanderer ran into the tremor boars again. The Goblin Wanderer was impaled by the boar's earth spikes and perished. Loot acquired, venom spider eggs *3. Damn it! So I almost got killed by venom spiders, and the mastermind behind it all was my own goblin. This damn fool is something else. In his eyes, anything lying on the ground is fair game for picking up. Now I get it. That's why he found gold nuggets near kobolds. Turns out those were ones they dug up and left there. Just as I was suppressing my excitement and mentally ranting like crazy, I watched in astonishment as the sleeping goblin laborer suddenly sprang up, dragged over a pile of wood, and inexplicably built a fence around the clearing. Crude animal pen, a simple structure for raising small animals or magical beast cubs, requires goblins with relevant abilities to unlock usage. Chapter 14, Wild Goblin Cavalry. To safely bring both me and Zhang Yiming home, Zhang Dashan proceeded with extreme caution along the way. Drawing on his rich adventuring experience, he carefully examined various traces in the forest, detected the movements of magical beasts in advance, and took wide detours around them, until Zhang Dashan discovered a series of chaotic footprints on the forest floor. His originally calm expression changed. He carefully examined the area again, his brow furrowing as if troubled. "Dad, what's wrong?" Zhang Yiming asked directly upon noticing his father's unusual behavior. Zhang Dashan shook his head and said, "There are many traces of goblin activity here, including advanced types like goblin warriors. Moreover, I spotted wolf paw prints suggesting these goblins might even have wolf riders among them." "Wolf riders? Aren't they a tier above goblin warriors?" Zhang Yiming sounded surprised. "So I suspect a tribe of big goblins has come out here. Never mind, Qi Yan is still recovering, let's head back to town first. We can report the situation to the Adventurers Guild later. Come on, let's go this way." I hesitated for a moment but didn't mention the goblin squad I'd encountered recently. It would be hard to explain how I, with just an ordinary goblin, had managed to defeat those goblins. Besides, if I tried to lie, I had no confidence I could fool Zhang Dashan, a seasoned adventurer. Tricking his foolish son, though, that might still work. Not long after the three of us left, a green head suddenly emerged, cautiously scanning the surroundings. After confirming there was no danger, it leapt out from the concealing bushes, glanced in the direction we had gone, then turned and scurried away at full speed. Moments later, a massive black wolf carrying a burly goblin galloped over swiftly. This goblin was even larger than most warriors. The black wolf lowered its head, sniffed the ground, then raised its gaze in the direction we had left, letting out a low, menacing growl. The goblin cavalry turned his head to look at his companions panting behind him, his expression a mix of annoyance and resignation. He was probably irritated by how slow they were, yet had no choice but to bring them along. After all, without knowing our capabilities, he needed cannon fodder to test the waters before deciding whether to fight. Zhang Yiming and I had been sprinting after Uncle Zhang Dashan the whole time, completely unaware that the goblin cavalry had already set their sights on us. Just as we were about to exit the misty forest, Uncle Zhang Dashan noticed how exhausted we were and let us pause to catch our breath. Zhang Yiming, the cheeky brat, quipped, "Dad, you're always bragging about how amazing you are, so why did you run so fast at the sight of a goblin cavalry?" Uncle Zhang Dashan patted his powerful bow and grinned. "Humph, it's only because I had you two with me. If not for keeping you safe, even with my current energy depletion, dealing with a measly goblin cavalry wouldn't be a problem. Just a flick of this bowstring and it'd be done." Zhang Yiming wasn't buying his father's boastful claims and said disdainfully, "Stop showing off. We actually looked up a lot of information in the school library to research my goblin warriors. Those goblin wolf riders are inherently stronger than regular goblin warriors, not to mention the wolves they ride. How could you possibly win without any energy?" Uncle Zhang Dashan was just about to retort, "Humph, just you wait, next time I get the chance," when a commotion erupted in the distance before he could finish. Uncle Zhang Dashan immediately stood up to check and noticed a group of shadowy green figures running toward us. "Holy shit, Jinx sir," Uncle Zhang Dashan cursed, grabbing us while we were still stunned and making a run for it. My goblin warrior quickly picked up his cleaver and followed. "What the hell is that? A wolf riders? Keep running. Don't look back." Zhang Yiming and I turned pale with fright, mustering every ounce of strength to sprint forward. The bridge at the eastern gate of White Moon Town was faintly visible ahead. As long as we reached it, the pursuing goblins probably wouldn't dare follow. Seeing us flee without resistance, the goblin cavalry relaxed, a cruel grin twisting its face as it crouched low and gave its black wolf a light pat. The black wolf let out a low growl, bounding past the cannon fodder goblins ahead in a few leaps as it pursued us. Uncle Zhang Dashan kept a close eye behind him as he fled. The moment the goblin cavalry moved, he noticed and secretly prepared. As the riders drew nearer, he suddenly spun around, loosing 3 arrows in a triangular formation aimed at different angles toward the wolf cavalry. The black wolf sprinting at full speed lowered its body to dodge 2 arrows, while the goblin cavalry tilted its head and deflected the remaining one with a swing of its blade. Uncle Zhang Dashan had intended to slow the enemy down, so he remained unfazed by the misses. In one smooth motion, he pulled out 3 more arrows, knocked them on his bow, and calmly aimed as he retreated step by step. The goblin cavalry growled in fury, spurring their black wolves to close and using the trees as cover. Seeing this, Uncle Zhang Dashan clutched his bow and arrows in both hands, turned, and sprinted toward us with the creatures in pursuit. This thoroughly enraged the goblin cavalry, who sped up its pursuit. Just then, Uncle Zhang Dashan suddenly turned and leaped backward, firing an arrow. The black wolf had no time to dodge, and though the goblin rider managed to twist aside, the arrow struck its shoulder, nearly knocking it off the wolf's back. But before Uncle Zhang Dashan could rejoice, an ice spike whistled through the air. Though he dodged in time, it grazed his arm, instantly coating it with frost, leaving the limb stiff and numb. Damn! A mutated goblin! Uncle Zhang Dashan tossed aside his bow, drew the short sword at his waist, and turned to flee. Seeing him injured and unable to use his bow, the goblin cavalry let out an excited roar, yanked the arrow from its shoulder, and urged the black wolf into a full-speed chase. "Sirong, have your goblin warriors hold off the cavalry to buy us time," Uncle Dashan Zhang shouted at me. When Zhang Yiming and I turned back, we saw his arm was injured. I grabbed Yiming, who was about to turn around, and kept running while ordering the goblin warriors to block the path. "Keep running, Uncle can outrun us." I steadied Yiming while focusing my attention on the goblin breeding ground, spending all my stored experience points to evolve 6 new goblins. There was no time to worry about keeping secrets now. If things took a turn for the worse, I'd release all the goblins at once. Evolution successful. Goblin has evolved into Goblin Thief. Goblin Thief. To enhance its survival skills, the goblin worked hard to lower its presence, successfully gaining the ability to vanish from others' sight. Basic invisibility. Gains invisibility when stationary, significantly reducing body odor and noises. The stealth effect weakens considerably when moving. Evolution successful. Goblin has evolved into Frost Goblin. Frost Goblin, a goblin with some innate magical talent that unexpectedly awakened its bloodline's ability to control frost. Frost Arrow launches a tracking ice spike shaped like an arrow at enemies. Successful hits can trigger freezing effects. Casting Frost Arrow consumes significant energy, requiring time to recover. Currently, a Frost Goblin can fire a maximum of 3 Frost Arrows before depleting its energy reserves. Evolution successful. Goblin has evolved into a Goblin Slinger. Goblin Slinger, a goblin skilled in long-range attacks using stones. The more suitable the stone, the higher the accuracy and attack power. Beginner precision, enhanced vision makes it easier to hit targets during ranged attacks. Evolution successful. Goblin has evolved into Goblin Tamer. Goblin Tamer, through survival in the wild, the goblin has gradually learned the ability to communicate with animals and can tame small creatures or baby magical beasts. Basic beast tongue, can engage in simple conscious communication with other magical beasts. Evolution successful. Goblin has evolved into Goblin Laborer. Evolution successful. Goblin has evolved into Goblin Warrior. Looking at the 6 evolved goblins in the breeding farm, I finally relaxed. With these sufficient trump cards now, we 3 should be able to ensure our safety. I turned back to see my Goblin Warrior taking a direct hit from the Goblin Cavalry, then seizing the opportunity to grab its arm and yank it down from its wolf mount. The 2 tumbled to the ground, locked in combat. But the Goblin Cavalry was stronger than my warrior, and with the Black Wolf's assistance, it quickly killed my Goblin Fighter. After death, the warrior's body dissolved into light and vanished, returning to my Beastmaster's space where it now lay beside the Goblin Wanderer. Fortunately, the warrior's desperate delaying tactic worked. By the time the Goblin Cavalry remounted its wolf and gave chase, Uncle Zhang Dashan had already led us across the bridge. At this moment, the battle at the outskirts of the Misty Forest caught the attention of the gate guards of White Moon Town. Upon realizing it was local hunters being pursued by goblins, they immediately summoned their beast companions, armed themselves, and charged forward. The guards' beast companions were a massive hyena and a sturdy black bull with curved horns, more than a match for the Goblin Cavalry. Combined with the guards' own combat prowess, the goblins stood no chance. Seeing the situation, the goblin riders could only rein in their mounts, let out furious roars, and turn to flee before the reinforcements arrived. Zhang Yiming and I watched the goblins retreat and finally exhaled in relief. We collapsed onto the bridge deck, limbs aching and panting heavily, utterly unwilling to move another muscle. Zhang Dashan dropped me off at my doorstep, called out a farewell, and hurried off with Zhang Yiming. He was eager to report the incidents of the Venom-Spine Spider Uprising and the goblins appearing near the forest outskirts to the Adventurers Guild in town. I dragged my weary body through the door and flopped straight onto the sofa. Hearing the noise, my sister Lu Zian came running out of her room. Seeing me completely disheveled, she asked anxiously, "Brother, are you okay?" I weakly waved my hand and said, "Little sis, pour me a glass of water, I'm dying of thirst." She hurriedly fetched a large glass of water and even grabbed a piece of bread from the kitchen. I gulped down the water in one go, devoured the bread in 3 bites, and collapsed onto the old couch with a long exhale, feeling life return to my body. Just then, Zian came jogging over and said, "I've drawn you a bath, go soak in some hot water." I rubbed her head and said with a smile, "Big brother is a bit tired. I'll just go straight to bed after showering. Tell mom and dad when they get back." She nodded seriously. The little girl was just too adorable. I gave her head another pat before heading into the bathroom for a shower. After showering and returning to my room, My eyelids started growing heavy the moment I hit the bed. Thinking about the newly evolved goblins, I fought off drowsiness and shifted my focus to the goblin breeding farm. In the crude animal pen recently built by goblin laborers, 2 workers were repairing a grass nest with branches and dried leaves. Nearby, 2 completed grass nests each held a venom-strike spider egg. The goblin tamer lay beside a spider egg, pressing his ear against it while carefully adjusting the grass nest beneath. Was he preparing to hatch these 3 spider eggs? Just as I grew curious, information popped up from the goblin breeding grounds: venom-spike spider eggs, incubating, hatching success rate 25%. Such a low success rate. If it fails, wouldn't all my suffering be for nothing? Hang on, come to think of it, if that idiot wanderer hadn't randomly touched those 3 eggs, the Crimson Flame Tiger wouldn't have died, we wouldn't have been chased so desperately by the goblins, and I wouldn't have had to expend all my experience points. Maybe if we'd stayed a few more days in the forest, the goblin warriors would have evolved instead of lying around in this greenhouse with that moron. But there was nothing I could do about the still corpse state goblin wanderer either. After a brief bout of helpless rage, exhaustion dragged me into sleep. Chapter 16, The Cause of the Beast Riot. I nearly lost my life right after going out on an adventure, which frightened my mother Lichin terribly. Wiping her tears, she kept murmuring that I should just choose a mundane profession instead. But I knew it was just her angry words in the moment. In this world, how long the weak can live depends entirely on luck. Moreover, a beast-taming grandmaster's lifespan is several times or even more than 10 times that of an ordinary person, and they can mostly remain at their peak for most of that time. Not many can resist such temptation. Well, except for that baker in our small town. After a couple of days, once I had recovered, I sneaked to the farms on the west side of town, caught some fish in the canal, and brought them home. Then, in front of my parents, I pulled out a nugget of gold from my pocket, saying I had found it while catching fish in the canal. The nugget was dull in color and covered in mud, but in my mother's eyes, it gleamed like pure gold. She quickly closed the windows and doors, stationed the phantom-faced spider by the entrance to keep watch, and only then did she take the gold. Parting the curtains slightly to let in some light, she examined it carefully, whispering excitedly, "Old Lu, take a look, I think it's real." My father, Lu Yuanyang, took the gold and examined it, then nodded and said, "It seems genuine." Perfect timing. Sihang's goblin warrior died, and that cleaver is pretty much ruined anyway. This is just the right opportunity to buy him a better weapon. My mother hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded in agreement. "All right, whatever you say." I quickly protested, "No need. The goblin warrior doesn't need such high-end equipment right now. It'd be heartbreaking if we lost it again." But my parents wouldn't hear it. After all, equipment rarely gets lost. If it does, it usually means the tamed beast died in battle, and the tamer would likely be in a dire situation too. If the person's gone, what's the use of hanging on to the money? I couldn't convince them otherwise, so I had to let them have their way, though I insisted the new weapon only be slightly better than the cleaver. Otherwise, if the goblin warrior evolved, we'd just have to replace it again. Speaking of that damned goblin wanderer, last time he actually brought back a piece of star metal ore. If it weren't for the goblin breeding farm's prompt, I wouldn't even have known the name of this ore. Even after learning its name, I still didn't understand its value and didn't dare to casually bring it out. Meanwhile, the town's adventurer guild organized a team to search the misty forest and discovered a temporary goblin tribe camp containing over 200 goblins, including a 3-meter-tall goblin chieftain, 2 tiers stronger than a goblin knight. Though lacking elemental manipulation abilities, its melee combat prowess even surpassed Zhang Dashan's flame tiger. With no powerful adventurer squads or mercenary groups recently arriving in White Moon Town, the guild issued a notice rallying all combat-capable townspeople to eliminate this goblin tribe 3 days later, preventing potential harm to residents. The guild also revealed the cause of the magical beast uproar in Misty Forest. Apparently a young green dragon had occupied a vast central territory, displacing all resident beasts and triggering a complete reshuffling of domains. This territorial upheaval caused widespread panic among forest creatures, throwing the entire woodland into chaos. Once the territories were redistributed, the magical beast uprisings gradually subsided, leaving the outskirts of the forest largely safe except for that stubborn goblin tribe that refused to retreat. After assessing the situation, townsfolk stopped worrying about beast tides. Many signed up for the goblin extermination operation scheduled 3 days later. Though most people's tamed beasts lacked combat potential, some had persistently trained theirs to peak condition, developing modest fighting capabilities. A united mob attack against the goblins would suffice. Participants kept multiplying. Townspeople exhibited herd mentality. When enrollment exceeded 200, the operation shed its danger and transformed into an amusing group activity, prompting even fence-sitters to join en masse. At Green Silk Workshop where my mother Lichin worked, owner Madame Huang decided to lead the extermination frontline. She declared paid leave for the entire workshop, sparking intense envy from my father. My mother pointed at the chipmunk happily munching on a nut while perched atop the ghost-faced spider's head and said, What are you jealous about? Do you seriously want to take Little Flower to fight goblins? Upon hearing its name, the chipmunk grinned at my mom, revealing its two prominent front teeth. My dad muttered, I just wanted to join in the fun. Ignoring him with an eye roll, my mom turned to me and asked, what's your plan then? Do you want to come with me and watch how Granny Huang fights? In my mind, I pictured myself standing amidst a group of spider-leading aunties, listening to their incessant chatter that transformed into a deafening, multi-layered buzz. Unable to suppress a full-body shudder, I hastily declined, no need, I'll figure something out when the time comes. My mom nodded, fine, there'll be plenty of people around anyway, just don't charge to the front lines. After all, your goblin warrior is still just a low-tier magic beast. Faced with my mom's endless nagging, what could I do but keep smiling? My face wore a grin, but my mind had already wandered off to the goblin breeding grounds. The goblin wanderer had just resurrected this morning and headed out, who knows how it's doing now. Oh, it's already lying down? How did it happen so fast this time? Curious, I glanced at the wanderer's travel journal. Goblin Wanderer's travel log. The goblin wanderer ventured deep into the misty forest and encountered a young green dragon. The young dragon approached curiously, but the wanderer's overpowering stench made the dragon sneeze uncontrollably. The goblin was caught in the toxic mist, leaving not even a bone behind. Loot obtained this journey, toxic solution. Yikes, sent straight to the grave the moment it stepped out. Did it just waltz right into the big boss's lair? Serves you right for never bathing, now you've been reduced to nothing by poison. But something seems off here. How can you bring back toxic solution after being poisoned? I curiously glanced at the item placement area. Damn, the already ramshackle wooden shed now had a massive dissolved hole, rendering it completely damaged, with two goblin craftsmen currently working on repairs. I couldn't help but shake my head and sigh. What's with the head shaking? Mom glared at me. Ha! I snapped out of my thoughts, looking at Mom in confusion. Seeing my bewildered expression, a flash of murderous intent crossed Mom's eyes as she grabbed the nearby broom and swung it at me. You little brat, after all my effort explaining for so long, you weren't even listening, were you? Chapter 17. The student team of Qingju Academy before dawn had fully broken. The clamor from the streets roused me from sleep. Blinking groggily, I heard my mother's voice calling me to get up from downstairs. I responded and opened the window beside the bed to look down. Below, scattered groups of people were chatting excitedly with all sorts of tamed beasts, all heading east toward the edge of town together. In a way, humans aren't so different from goblins. When we hold absolute advantage and get to kick the enemy while they're down, we all get particularly fired up. When Zhang Yiming and I arrived at the eastern gate of the town, we saw a dense crowd of hundreds gathered outside. Thankfully, the guildmaster of the Adventurers Guild, Zhang Pied, that short, white-haired old man, shouted loudly for everyone to put away their spirit beasts. Otherwise, there simply wouldn't have been enough space outside the town gate for both the crowd and their summoned creatures. Just as Zhang Pied was loudly explaining the precautions to everyone, Zhang Yiming tugged at my sleeve, signaling me to look to the side. I turned my head and saw 4 teenagers, 2 boys and 2 girls, dressed in identical adventure outfits, whispering among themselves on the outskirts of the crowd. Hey, those look like students from Qingju Academy, Zhang Yiming whispered. Thanks for the info, Mr. Know-It-All, but I can see the school name embroidered on their uniforms too. They're probably here for their holiday trial. Mr. Know-It-All? What's that? Zhang Yiming was momentarily stunned, but he was used to my odd remarks. With a twitch of his eyebrows and a grin, he said, those 2 girls are lucky, showing up just when the town's about to fight some goblins. I smiled wryly. Fine, in your eyes, pretty ones are big sisters, while the plain-looking and males are all ghosts. Our luck is just terrible. With so many of us entering the woods together, any magic beasts will be scared away. I'm just a novice mage, I can't possibly be sent to the edge of the mist for missions right away. Those beasts are terrifying. Zhao Xiuxue, the charming and cute girl with a wooden staff in hand and her black hair tied in a ponytail, pouted as she spoke. Another girl in the team, carrying a bow and arrows with a short haircut that gave her a heroic air, and the temporary captain, Suyu, smiled reassuringly at Zhao Xiuxue. We were always meant to train at the edge of the mist. The beasts outside aren't strong enough and won't count for training points. Actually, you should be grateful someone spotted that goblin tribe in advance. If we'd run into those monsters after exhausting ourselves from the adventure, we'd truly be doomed. The chubby yet muscular youth Hu Shua, who carried a greatsword and a sturdy bullhide shield, scratched his head with a simpleton's grin. They're just goblins, how bad could it be? Even if we can't fight them, can't we just run away? Suyu shook her head slightly and explained with a gentle smile, I've just made some inquiries. That goblin tribe has a goblin chieftain, along with goblin wolf riders and frost goblins. With bad luck, we really could die out there. Yikes, that's at least a major tribe then, remarked the last member, the delicate-featured Zhao Xiaofeng, twin brother of apprentice mage Zhao Xiuxue. Though carrying a short sword, his actual class was apprentice support specialist, specializing in buffing teammates. Suyu nodded. I hear there are at least 200 goblins. Yikes, that's still manageable. Zhao Xiuxue patted her chest in relief. Otherwise, we'd be captured by those goblins to bear their children. Just thinking about it gives me chills. Zhao Xiaofeng smacked his sister hard on the back of her head and scolded in a low voice. I told you to stop reading those weird fantasy novels. Goblins wouldn't take you to breed, they'd just chop you into pieces and roast you for dinner. That's still terrifying. Zhao Xiaoxue protested, rubbing her head. Stop fooling around, they've already set off. Let's catch up with them, Suyu reminded. To prevent the goblins from fleeing before battle and seeking revenge later, the townspeople crossed the bridge and split into several teams as planned. Each group, led by more capable townsfolk, advanced towards the goblin tribe's camp from different directions for a pincer movement. After the crowd dispersed, everyone summoned their contracted beasts, placing the tougher ones at the front before continuing their advance. Several students from Qingzhou Academy happened to be in our team. When I summoned my goblin warrior, their eyes lit up instantly. Wow, look at that little brother's goblin warrior. It looks so strong. Zhao Xiaoxue excitedly grabbed her companion as she exclaimed. Zhao Xiaofeng said with a headache, keep your voice down, that's so rude. And there's something really off about what you just said. Yeah, Hu Shua nodded in agreement. What if the person just has a baby face? You can't just casually call someone little brother. Agree with you, my foot. That's clearly a middle schooler. What baby face, they're literally young. Ugh, no, that's not the point. Zhao Xiaofeng felt his headache worsening. Captain, can you shut these two up? The kid's looking over here now. Ugh, so embarrassing. I wanna die. Suyu nodded at me and Zhang Yiming with a smile, then turned to her companions and said, Xiaofeng is right. You can look, but keep your voices down. Otherwise, people will find us strange. We're wearing academy uniforms, and I don't want any weird rumors spreading back to school. Oh, compared to her brother, Zhao Xiaoxue was more inclined to listen to Suyu and immediately lowered her voice to a whisper. But Captain, that goblin warrior is really well trained, huh? Suyu nodded in agreement. Indeed, not only is it physically strong, but it also seems to have experienced many battles. It has the bearing of a true warrior now. While the group quietly discussed among themselves, Zhang Yiming and I were also whispering to each other. Nice going, bro. Those two girls were clearly drawn to your goblin warrior. Zhang Yiming said with a laugh. Come on, there were obviously 4 people there, and compared to that, is that big dog the evolved form of a galehound, a tempest hound? I pointed to the waist-high white shaggy dog summoned by Zhao Xiaoxue. Hey, you're right. That girl's tamed beast is the same as mine. What a coincidence! Zhang Yiming exclaimed excitedly. I shook my head in amusement and turned to observe the 4 students' summoned beasts. Besides the long-haired girl's tempest hound, the short-haired girl had summoned a massive black eagle with a striking red crest, a storm raptor, capable of aerial combat and wielding both wind elemental power and minor fire abilities. The plump youth's beast was a broad-bodied wild boar, which immediately covered itself and its master with a thin layer of rock armor upon emerging, a earth-type magical beast called a rock boar. With 2 more evolutions, it would become the quake boar we had encountered before. I noticed a frail youth's beast was also a dog. This canine was much larger than the galehound beside it, appearing fierce with fiery red fur that emitted scorching heat, even distorting the surrounding air. It turned out to be a flamehound, a creature that had mastered fire energy. Chapter 18 Encounter with the Goblin Chieftain. I didn't even realize when the battle had begun. By the time our team arrived at the destination, that goblin tribe had already been scattered, with the wild goblins fleeing in all directions upon seeing the unfavorable situation. The townspeople quickly dispersed to block the escaping goblins. Zhang Yiming and I were already at the forefront of the group and moving quickly. My eyes immediately lit up as I spotted a fleeing wild goblin warrior. Calling out to Zhang Yiming, I charged after it with my own goblin warrior in tow. Zhang Yiming instantly grasped my intention and gave chase with his windhound. My goblin warrior was clearly stronger than the wild one. With the windhound's assistance, we cut down the fleeing goblin warrior in just a few strikes. Turning back to find another enemy for more experience points, I discovered the entire field was already bustling with noisy townsfolk and their battle beasts. There simply weren't enough goblins to go around. Many people didn't even get a chance to strike. They could only vent their battle beasts' energy on nearby innocent trees, leaving marks as proof they hadn't come for nothing. There are more players than monsters, not enough to go around. I sighed helplessly. After coming all this way for such meager experience points, I couldn't help feeling resentful, but there was nothing to be done about it. With so many villagers making such a commotion, all the magical beasts in the area have long been scared away. I wanted to sneak out and gain some experience, but there was nothing left to kill. At that moment, I saw the 4 students from Qingzhou Academy huddle together to discuss briefly before heading deeper into the forest with their spirit beasts in tow. Oh, they must be here for the holiday trial, heading into the forest to hunt magical beasts and train their tamed creatures. This direction, are they planning to go to the edge of the mist? Judging by their setup, it might actually be feasible. Just then, my best friend Zhang Yiming ran over and patted my shoulder in alarm, saying, Sihan, something crazy, I overheard my dad and his buddies talking. There really was a goblin chieftain. Oh, really? Then who killed it? Granny Huang or Old Man Zhang? I asked absent-mindedly. But Zhang Yiming shook his head. Nope. The goblin chieftain took one look at the situation and bolted. That's why the fight ended so quickly. Ha, I said, puzzled. Wasn't the goblin camp surrounded? How'd it get away? Who knew it would react so quickly? It turned tail and dashed toward the fog's edge before the fight even started. Some tried to block it, but apparently, it charged straight through a barrage of spirit beast attacks. Must have taken some serious injuries. Doubt it'll dare come back after that. Zhang Yiming said, by the way, where are those two girls? He glanced around but couldn't spot the little squad from Qingju Academy. I pointed toward the depths of the forest. Over there, they headed off that way, probably off on their holiday trial. Damn it! Zhang Yiming suddenly slapped his thigh and yelled, startling me. What are you doing? They definitely don't know about the goblin chieftain yet. We should catch up and warn them. Zhang Yiming urged anxiously. I'm speechless, I said. Come on, they're students from the academy, 4 professionals plus 4 spirit beasts. Dealing with a goblin leader is more than enough, alright? Wait, did they come as a group of 4? Zhang Yiming paused for a moment before continuing. Even if sister isn't in danger, since it's her first time here, she might need a guide. Come on, before they get too far, let's hurry and follow them to see. I was just about to argue when my heart suddenly skipped a beat. The whole big sister thing wasn't important. What mattered was that venturing deep into the forest was Zhang Yiming's idea. I was only going along because I couldn't talk him out of it. If we encountered magical beasts during our trip back and forth and were forced to fight, it would make perfect sense. If my parents found out, I'd just shift the blame onto Zhang Yiming. He probably wouldn't have any objections anyway. As for danger, that goblin leader seemed thoroughly terrified. Without any unforeseen circumstances, he had likely fled back to the fog's edge or deeper into the misty forest. With my current strength, staying away from the foggy areas meant I'd be safe. Yep, flawless plan. So when Zhang Yiming pulled me along, I verbally protested but didn't resist physically, following him as he chased after the direction the verdant bamboo students had gone. Although we weren't physically weak, we were still far inferior to professionals. After chasing for a while without spotting any trace of the Qingju Academy team, Zhang Yiming lost heart and slumped onto a clean patch of ground, panting heavily. I had considerable energy within me, which provided some enhancement. Though I was also tired, it was much easier for me than for Zhang Yiming. Seeing Zhang Yiming finally give up the chase, I secretly sighed in relief too. This spot was just right. Any further and we'd approach the edge of the mist. Who knows what might come rushing out from there. Just then, heavy footsteps sounded from afar. As Zhang Yiming and I turned to look, a massive 4-meter-tall goblin with bulging muscles covered in fresh blood came charging toward us, panting hoarsely. Shit! It's the goblin chieftain! Zhang Yiming whispered in alarm, inadvertently catching the attention of the already nervous goblin leader. The goblin chieftain initially looked up in fearful surprise, but upon seeing we were just 2 young humans, visibly relaxed. Then its eyes suddenly sharpened, flashing with cruel hatred as a savage grin split its face. Gripping a massive stone hammer, it charged toward us. Run! I immediately grabbed Zhang Yiming's arm and bolted, simultaneously commanding our goblin warrior to intercept the chieftain. But there were 3 whole tiers between a regular goblin warrior and their chieftain. Even severely wounded, the chieftain was far beyond what our lowly goblin could handle. The goblin chieftain casually swung his stone hammer. Though the goblin warrior blocked the attack with his sturdy weapon, the sheer force sent him staggering back 2 steps before he collapsed to the ground. Zhang Yiming's Gale Hound barked aggressively at the goblin chieftain, taunting him. Seeing the enemy ignore it, the hound pounced from behind, aiming to bite. Unexpectedly, the chieftain was ready. Just as the hound was about to sink its teeth into his heel, the stone hammer suddenly swung sideways, striking the hound square on the head. The Gale Hound whimpered as it was sent flying, its body trembling briefly before dissolving into streams of light and vanishing. Split up and run! I shouted, turning to spit at the goblin chieftain and slapping my own backside in a mocking gesture. Once the chieftain took the bait, enraged, I spun around and bolted in the opposite direction. The goblin chieftain bared its fangs with a furious roar and charged towards me in great strides. Panting heavily as he fled, Zhang Yiming turned his head at the sound, only to see the goblin chieftain chasing after my retreating figure. Regret instantly overwhelmed him, tears streaming from his eyes. Damn it, you idiot! Zhang Yiming slapped himself across the face. Clenching his teeth, he forced his exhausted body to summon up whatever strength remained as he staggered desperately toward the edge of the forest. He prayed the townsfolk hadn't all left yet. He needed to find reinforcements, and fast. After a while, 4 students from Qingju Academy, led by 2 large dogs, followed the trail of the goblin chieftain and arrived. Upon noticing human footprints on the ground, their expressions changed. Oh no, that goblin leader seems to have encountered someone else. Quick, let's chase after them. Chapter 19. Defeating the goblin leader. I was being chased by that vicious goblin leader, but I wasn't panicked. In fact, I felt a little excited. After running for a while, Seeing the distance between the goblin leader and me closing rapidly, I didn't hesitate any longer. Reaching out around me, over a dozen magic circles suddenly lit up on the ground. My goblin battle pets, which I had long prepared for combat in the breeding ground, glared at the goblin leader with weapons in hand, grinning ferociously. The goblin chieftain's savage face twisted with shock as it instinctively turned to look at the crazed goblin warrior chasing relentlessly behind it. "Ha! Gotcha stunned now, didn't you? Charge! Kill it!" I roared before hastily retreating several steps back. The goblin warrior brandishing its tetanus iron-tipped spear was the first to charge forward, followed closely by two goblin craftsmen wielding stone hammers. Goblin tamers and thieves mingled among the frontline forces, bringing up the rear with stone spears. The frost goblin, having limited magical reserves for only 3 attacks, conserved its energy, remaining motionless while gathering power between its hands, patiently biding its time. The goblin slinger carried a wooden basket crafted specially by goblin artisans, maneuvering into position opposite the frost goblin on either side of their chieftain, this positioning allowing coordinated attacks while creating openings for allies. The goblin slinger retrieved a carefully carved spherical stone from its basket and hurled it with tremendous force toward their chieftain. As the goblin warrior charged head-on, the chieftain sneered contemptuously, raising its hammer to crush the attacker's skull when suddenly a whistling round stone came streaking from the flank, aimed squarely at its eye. The startled chieftain barely raised its arm in time. Smack! The stone hammered against its limb, violently reopening a freshly clotted wound. At the same time, a rusty iron-tipped spear seized the opportunity to plunge into a still bleeding wound on the goblin chieftain's belly, giving it a vicious twist. Roar! The goblin chieftain bellowed angrily and swung its hammer, but the goblin warrior rolled away like a lazy donkey, dodging the blow. Instead, another goblin on the side stabbed at its kidney with a stone spear, barely breaking the skin. Ordinary goblins were much slower in reaction than goblin warriors. The attacking goblin had intended to stab and run, but it never expected the enraged chieftain to counterattack with a backhand hammer swing that smashed its head straight into its chest cavity. The goblin collapsed to the ground, limbs twitching briefly before dissolving into radiant light and returning to the beast space, leaving behind only its blood-stained crude stone spear. After some probing, the goblin beasts realized that attacking the intact parts of the goblin chieftain's body inflicted little damage, so they shifted their focus to its unhealed old wounds instead. The goblin chieftain, after all, was the ruler of a small tribe. When had it ever endured such humiliation? If not for its previous severe injuries and the 4 adventurers who had worsened its condition, it could have crushed these goblins to pieces in an instant. In the chaotic battle, after the goblin chieftain smashed 3 goblin beasts to death, its freshly healed wounds tore open again, fueling its rage even further. Finally, while trying to kill a fleeing goblin engineer, the chieftain overextended itself and left an opening. A round stone struck it square in the eye, *splat*, bursting in a spray of blood. Its body stiffened as it covered its eyes and let out a piercing scream. The frost goblin, which had been holding its ground, saw an opportunity and unleashed the chilling arrow it had been charging all along. Thanks to its combat instincts, the goblin chieftain managed to twist its body just in time to evade the attack, but its right arm was still grazed by the ice arrow. Instantly, frost spread across its limb, numbing it completely. Its fingers loosened, and its weapon clattered to the ground. The goblin thief, who had been idling among the goblin ranks without doing much, suddenly perked up. It lunged forward with lightning speed, snatched up the massive stone hammer, and began dragging it across the ground as it bolted away. The goblin chieftain reached out with its left hand but grasped only air. A ominous sinking feeling gripped its heart. Disarmed and with its right arm half crippled, its already severe injuries became even more dire. After killing several goblins with punches from its left hand, it endured the remaining 2 ice arrows from the frost goblin, sandwiched between relentless harassment from other goblin beasts and desperate attacks from 2 goblin warriors. Half its body froze solid, completely immobilizing it, rendered utterly defenseless. With eyes gleaming red, a swarm of goblin beasts pounced, snarling, and tearing at it chaotically. Amid the frenzy, the goblin warriors severed the leader's head. Seeing the goblin leader finally dead, I let out a sigh of relief, then ordered the remaining goblins to quickly gather the weapons scattered on the ground and return to the beast space. The goblin thief, upon receiving the order, ran to the corpse of the goblin leader, dug into the wound on its chest, and pulled out its still faintly beating heart. Clutching it, he returned to the beast taming space. Though curious about what it was doing, I didn't have time to dwell on it. Quickly, I led the injured goblin warrior and left the scene. I feared my best friend might bring townsfolk to rescue me, and the situation at the scene would be hard to explain. Not long after I left, 4 students from Qingju Academy arrived at the battlefield. Seeing the goblin leader's corpse decapitated and mangled beyond recognition, they all wore strange expressions. There are traces of frost spells, blade wounds, blunt force trauma, and numerous small lacerations. Zhao Xiaofeng analyzed the injuries on the goblin leader's body. Could it be the townsfolk who ganged up on them with their tamed beasts? Hu Shuo suggested. Captain Suyu surveyed the area and slightly furrowed her brows. Apart from the signs of battle, there seems to be only one set of human footprints on the ground. The rest all appear to be goblin tracks. Could there be another goblin tribe in these woods? Zhao Xiuxue said with a hint of fear in her voice. Suyu shook her head, hard to say. But judging by the traces left behind, that human seems to have escaped successfully. Though, where did all those goblins go? There aren't any departing footprints. I had no idea what an unsolvable riddle I had posed for them. Hobbling along with Goblin Warrior number 1, I ran into my best friend Zhang Yiming on the road back to town. He had brought people to rescue me. Seeing that I was finally safe, I heaved a sigh of relief, and the Goblin Warrior who had been acting for so long could finally return to the taming space to heal its injuries. Zhang Yiming, his face full of anxiety, threw himself into my arms upon seeing that I was unharmed, bawling loudly. I stood there with my arms outstretched, torn between hugging him and patting him on the back, awkward, yet somewhat moved. But really, a grown man crying and clinging to me like this, how was I supposed to show my face outside after this? Watching the laughing townsfolk behind me, I couldn't help but mourn for my best friend. I estimated Zhang Yiming's socially embarrassing moment would spread throughout Baiwei town within half a day. Chapter 20 The Goblin Warrior's Wish. Although my best friend took the blame for everything, I still couldn't escape my mother's feather duster in the end. There was no helping it. When Li Qin heard I'd been chased by the goblin commander, she was frightened out of her wits, her face completely drained of color. Seeing me return alive nearly made her faint, leaving me filled with guilt. So getting a beating was inevitable. It was all part of a mother's profound love. Still, my backside genuinely hurt so much I could only sleep lying face down that night. After a whole day of effort, I finally had time to properly observe the goblin farm. After defeating a formidable enemy in an intense battle, gained 76 experience points. Seeing this record, I nearly jumped off the bed in excitement. This harvest was enormous. Combined with the remaining points and the experience gained from killing wild goblin warriors, the goblin farm now boasts 92 experience points. It's almost enough to evolve the goblin warrior. I focused my attention on the goblin warrior, only to notice a yellow exclamation mark appear above its head. Not just it, the goblin tamer had a green exclamation mark as well. After 16 years without playing games, suddenly seeing these two colored exclamation marks left me with indescribable feelings. After a brief moment of melancholy, I shifted my focus to the goblin warrior, and the content of the yellow exclamation mark popped up. My name is Lu Sihang, and that day I saw the system prompt, Goblin Warrior's Wish, a desire to grow stronger. A desire to grow stronger. After prolonged battles, the Goblin Warrior has reached its limit. Only evolution can make it stronger. Please evolve it as soon as possible. Fulfilling the Goblin Warrior's wish will grant a random reward. I didn't expect evolving the Goblin Warrior to come with a reward, but I was still 8 experience points short. No choice, I'd have to risk getting beaten up and head back to the Misty Forest. What exactly is this reward? It's got me oddly curious. Then I turned my attention back to the Goblin Tamer. If yellow exclamation marks represent wishes, then what does the green one signify? Goblin Tamer's request, the flesh of the strong. The flesh of the strong. Goblin breeders discovered that hearts dug out from goblin chieftains by goblin thieves, when fed to venomous spider hatchlings, unexpectedly accelerated their growth. The goblin breeders now hope to retrieve power-infused body parts from formidable enemies after each battle to nourish their monster spawn. I see now, this green exclamation mark is less of a quest and more of a hint. I silently commit this reminder to heart. After the battle ends, I'll have the goblin rogue check it out, or perhaps let the goblin warrior drag the entire corpse back to the beast taming space, leaving the goblins to handle it as they see fit. To be honest, at first I thought we'd be lucky if even one of those 3 spider eggs hatched. But as the goblin tamer kept nurturing them, the hatching rate kept improving, and in the end, all 3 spiders emerged. I grew increasingly curious about what changes would occur when these 3 venom-fanged spider hatchlings were raised by goblins. Could they possibly become goblin pets? After 2 more days, the wound on my butt finally healed. Taking advantage of my parents being at work, I planned to sneak out to the outskirts of Misty Forest to hunt some magical beasts and gather 100 experience points. Once the Goblin Warrior successfully evolves, my parents probably won't oppose my trips to the outskirts of Misty Forest anymore. To spare my butt from further suffering, I told my sister I was going to meet some buddies. Under her speechless gaze, I even disguised myself before leaving, wearing a straw hat and a high-collared coat that covered half my face, just in case any acquaintances spotted me, and told my parents. I arrived at the outskirts of the Misty Forest with practiced ease. Following the principle that even mosquito legs count as meat, I first found a slime by the riverside and had the Goblin Warrior cleave it in one stroke. After walking a short distance, I spotted several gale hares grazing. Having learned from previous experiences, I knew neither I nor the Goblin Warrior stood a chance against these rabbits. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, I summoned both the Goblin Slinger and Goblin Thief. The gale hares had already noticed us, but due to the distance, they remained confident in their speed. They simply kept a wary eye on us while continuing to graze. After a while, as they finished eating and prepared to leave, one rabbit had just moved when crack, a goblin slinger's rounded stone came flying, exploding the rabbit's head. The other rabbits screamed, their bodies enveloped in wind elements as they grew lighter and fled in different directions. Thud! A rabbit had barely run 2 steps before being impaled by a goblin thief's iron-tipped wooden spear. The remaining rabbits panicked further, accelerating their escape. The goblin slinger's aim wasn't precise enough, only hitting one rabbit's hind leg, allowing the goblin thief to reap yet another easy kill. The surviving rabbits vanished into the distance, though I didn't much care, catching one had been good enough. I hadn't expected the goblin slinger to manage hitting another at such long range. I cleaned up the scene and continued into the forest with my goblin warrior. Following the direction of a fleeing swiftwind rabbit, we unexpectedly encountered the rabbit charging back with 2 ironhead wolves in tow. Overjoyed, I led the goblin warrior forward, first slaying the rabbit, then summoning a group of goblins to surround the wolves. In the end, I gained enough experience points. Goblin Warrior successfully evolved into Goblin Champion. Goblin Champion, after numerous battles, the Goblin Warrior finally activated its bloodline through sheer bravery, gaining even greater power. Might, the Goblin Champion possesses formidable physical strength. Valor, fearless against strong foes, its rich combat experience grants it sharper battle instincts. You have fulfilled the Goblin Warrior's wish. Random reward obtained, your Goblin Thief has gained the buff, half effort, double results. Half effort, double results. True to its name, this status allows leveling up with half the experience for double the effect. Any goblin with this status will require only half the usual experience to evolve at their current level. Upon evolution, it will trigger simultaneous evolution in another goblin of the same tier who meets the evolution requirements. If no other qualifying goblin exists at that tier, only the status-holding goblin will evolve. After successful evolution, I didn't linger in the forest and hurried home with the tall, burly Goblin Champion. Along the way, everyone who saw us reacted with astonishment. Li Qin returned from the workshop and saw the Goblin Warrior looking shocked, then somewhat annoyed. But when she noticed my excitement, her anger faded as she let out a helpless sigh. Gently embracing me, she stroked my head and said, "Promise me, you must always keep yourself safe." My excitement settled into calm determination as I firmly replied, "I will." She said she'd go cook a celebratory meal with extra dishes. I had the Goblin Warrior retrieve 2 swiftwind rabbits and 1 ironhead wolf from the beast taming space, carrying them into the kitchen as I announced, "Today's spoils." With a smile, she replied, "Save them for your tamed beast. Now that it's evolved into a Goblin Warrior, it needs more meat to grow." I shook my head. "It's fine, there's still an ironhead wolf reserved for it." She was quite surprised, having initially thought the Goblin Warrior had evolved during the battle with the ironhead wolf. I found her dazed expression a bit odd but didn't pay it much mind, unaware that her imagination had already conjured up a whole scenario. Snapping out of her thoughts, she told me to bring out the other ironhead wolf, explaining that its hide could be sold for money while the meat, though sour and astringent, could be roasted with some seasoning and fed to the goblins. Following Li Qin and the Goblin Warrior into the courtyard, I assisted under her directions, working alongside the warrior to roughly skin and butcher the prey. That evening, our family of 4 shared a lively dinner indoors, filled with laughter and chatter. Meanwhile, the Goblin Warrior sat in the courtyard with a large basin, devouring every last bite of the seasoned roasted wolf meat, bones and all. It watched as the face-patterned spider leisurely ate chunks of meat from its small bowl, unconsciously licking its own lips. Sensing the intense gaze upon it, the startled spider hurriedly quickened its feeding pace. Noticing the mix of delight and slight regret emanating from the Goblin Warrior, I grew somewhat troubled. While there was only one Goblin Warrior visible now, my beast taming space held an entire tribe of goblins. Where would I ever find enough meat to feed them all later? Suddenly, an idea struck me. Since goblin breeders can raise small animals, perhaps I could catch a few live swiftwind rabbits to place inside. But catching them myself would be too difficult. Either I'd have to raid a nest for kits or ask Uncle Zhang if he had any traps for swiftwind rabbits. With this thought, my mind instantly cleared. I decided to visit Zhang Yiming's house tomorrow to inquire, and while I was at it, show off my Goblin Warrior to my best friend. Before bed, I habitually glanced at the goblin farm. Oh, there was another corpse in that shabby shed. Turns out that wandering goblin drifter had died his way back home again. This time, the bastard set a new record, managed to survive a whole 2 days out there before finally kicking the bucket back here. Goblin drifter's travel log: misty forest, chased by wolf packs, pursued by wild boars, intimidated by gnolls, discovered a freshly ripened flame fruit, picked up a discarded ragged leather armor. The goblin drifter joined a goblin hunting party and returned to the goblin tribe. While wandering through the tribe, he scavenged a rusted iron dagger and a metal ring from the garbage pile. The goblin drifter blended into a group of goblins and, led by their chieftain, launched an attack on a lone 2-headed ogre mage. The goblin chieftain was obliterated by a fireball spell, and the goblin drifter snatched the falchion dropped by the chieftain before fleeing. The goblin drifter fell off a cliff, where he picked up an iron ore chunk, the goblin drifter succumbed to severe blood loss. Loot acquired this trip: ripe flame fruit, ragged leather armor, rusty dagger, magic ring, falchion, iron Oregon. I know about flame fruits. They're rich in fire energy, mainly used for brewing magic potions or fed directly to fire element tamed beasts. But what's this magic ring for, anyway? Magic ring, a ring emitting faint magical vibrations, likely possessing wondrous effects. The description on the breeding farm sounded like those clickbait articles from my previous life, completely useless. I had a goblin retrieve the unremarkable bronze ring from the beast taming space. Out of curiosity, I slipped it onto the ring finger of my right hand. Instantly, the mist-like energy within me surged into the ring, causing it to glow faintly. My body suddenly felt lighter. A flash of insight struck me. I remembered the catalog of magical artifacts my old buddy Jean Dashin had brought back from an alchemy shop in the big city during his adventurer days. There was a ring called the Ring of Lightness in there. When worn, it continuously drains a small amount of the wearer's energy to maintain a low-level cat's agility state, making the body lighter and movements more nimble. I have to admit, the suicidal goblin drifter never fails to surprise me. Chapter 22 The Bronze Badge. When I woke up in the morning, I had breakfast with my younger sister, gave her some instructions, and then rushed off to my best friend's house. I had originally planned to ask Jean Dashin for tips on setting traps to catch swift-winged rabbits, but Zhang Yiming told me his father had gone away on business and wouldn't be back for a few days. In that case, I flashed Zhang Yiming a mischievous grin, and my sinister expression sent a visible shudder through his entire body. Damn, you suddenly grinning like an idiot scared the hell out of me, Zhang Yiming complained. Wanna come in and sit for a while? Don't move, let me show you something amazing. With a smile, I gestured with my hand, and a beast-summoning magic circle materialized on the ground. Zhang Yiming didn't understand why I was acting crazy so early in the morning, but then he saw the goblin warrior in the summoning circle and froze in shock. Wait, what the hell did you feed this goblin warrior? How did it suddenly get so big? Though he already had an idea in his mind, he couldn't quite believe it. I didn't say anything, just grinned at him. Zhang Yiming stared at me, his jaw dropping wider and wider. No way, holy shit. Holy shit, is that a goblin champion? I nodded smugly and said, so, pretty impressive, huh? Holy shit, you're amazing, Zhang Yiming shouted excitedly, circling around the goblin warrior and even reaching out to touch its muscles. As he kept touching, his expression grew melancholy. Though still smiling, his face visibly stiffened. After all, a teenager in his early teens couldn't quite mask his acting. I could instantly tell what he was thinking. As the saying goes, you fear your brother's suffering, but also dread seeing him ride a Land Rover. It wasn't jealousy, but rather the fear that when a friend grows too strong, you might not keep up and eventually drift apart. I patted my dazed best friend on the shoulder, raised an eyebrow, and said, what's the matter? Scared by your bro's talent? Don't worry, we're brothers for life. When I make it big, I'll have your back forever. TSK, you just got lucky. Once my Swiftwind Wolf King grows up, it'll surpass yours in no time, Zhang Yiming said, refusing to admit defeat. But I knew deep down he was genuinely touched. A teenager's emotions come and go swiftly. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Yiming was excited again. With a goblin warrior, you're qualified to register as an adventurer. Too bad the goblin warrior is a bit too big. Otherwise, I still have some old gear at home. Alright, don't go squandering your family heirlooms like a reckless heir. Those are your dad's keepsakes. I quickly grabbed his arm, afraid he'd rush inside and empty his father's treasured collection. What do you know? The biggest advantage of goblins is being able to use all kinds of equipment. Without gear, their combat power drops significantly, Zhang Yiming said urgently. I replied, obviously I know that. But I'm not going on adventures, just hunting some game at the edge of the misty forest at most. What do I need equipment for? Zhang Yiming snapped out of it and said, true, you're not a professional yet anyway. You can't go to dangerous places. Yeah, I plan to register at the Adventurers Guild first and see if there are any simple bounty tasks. Want to come along? I said. Zhang Yiming clearly wanted to go with me, but still shook his head and said, no, someone's coming over today. My mom specifically told me to stay home and wait. Alright then, I'll head off first. I nodded at him, recalled the goblin warrior back into my beast space, waved my hand and left my best friend's place. After walking along the street for over 10 minutes, I arrived at the town's Adventurers Guild. The guild building was quite large by White Moon Town standards. Just the entrance hall alone was considerably bigger than the entire tavern next door. But recently there weren't many adventurers coming in. The guild was quite deserted, with very few people around. Beneath the mission bulletin board stood 4 familiar figures, whispering about the bounty tasks posted there. Spotting the 4 students from Qingju Academy, I paused mid-step before smiling and heading toward the old man sitting on the rocking chair by the window, basking in the sunlight. Zhang Pied sensed someone approaching. He opened his eyes, turned his head to see it was me, and raised an eyebrow with a hint of curiosity. Master Zhang, I've come for my adventurer certification, I said, startling him with my opening words. Zheng Pide was the head of the town's adventurer guild, a retired veteran adventurer who also taught at the local school. Naturally, he knew me well. Although I didn't seem like a troublesome kid, it hadn't been long since I activated the contract magic circle before my goblin evolved into a goblin warrior. The speed was already astonishing, and judging by what I was implying. Chapter 23, The Thief's Evolution Conditions. Zheng Pide sat up straight, his expression turning serious as he said to me, "Summon your contracted beast. Let me see it." Studying his face to confirm he wasn't joking, I took 2 steps back and summoned the goblin champion in the open space. Even though he had some expectations, witnessing me, a youth who had just awakened my beast taming space not long ago, actually summon a goblin warrior made the self-proclaimed well-experienced Zheng Pide involuntarily suck in a sharp breath. I wore a polite smile on my face, but silently added a line for this breath-sucking old man in my mind. This kid possesses monstrous talent, must not be left alive. Zheng Pide glanced at me strangely, probably finding my expression a tad peculiar. "Go to the counter. Take a form and fill it out yourself," he said. Obediently, I went to the counter, asked the girl on duty for a form, carefully filled in my information, and returned to hand it to him. Zheng Pide took the form, glanced at it, stood up and said, "Wait here, I'll go register your information." I asked doubtfully, "Aren't we supposed to do some tests first?" He turned back and glanced at the vigorous goblin warrior who looked ready to evolve again at any moment, then rolled his eyes at me. "Test my ass." My smile stiffened as I thought to myself resentfully, this grumpy old man must be jealous of gifted young people like me because of his own aging and declining health. The grumpy old man went into the office and soon came out, tossing a small bronze badge to me. "Done. Your information has been recorded in the guild system. This badge contains your personal details. Don't lose it. The first one's free, but replacement costs over 30 silver coins. Holy shit, 30-some silver coins could cover my parents' living expenses for a year or two. I took the badge, secretly deciding to keep this precious thing at the goblin breeding farm. After getting the badge, I thought about checking if the Adventurers Guild had any simple bounty tasks, so I could complete them while grinding XP in the forest. Turning my head, I met 4 pairs of curious eyes. The 2 boys averted their gazes in a fluster, awkwardly chatting about some random stuff. Suyu smiled and nodded at me, her face slightly flushed as she smoothed her hair, then turned Zhao Xiaoxue, who was still staring at me curiously, back around. I smiled and walked straight over to them. "Hello, big brother and sister." I greeted them cheerfully. "Hello," Suyu nodded with a gentle smile. "Hello, little brother," Zhao Xiaoxue responded warmly. "Oh, hello there young man," Zhao Xiaofeng said with a chuckle, his expression slightly awkward. Yes, hello," Hu Shuo replied somewhat bashfully. "Little brother, you just summoned a goblin warrior. How old are you?" Zhao Xiaoxue asked curiously. Though slightly blunt, no one stopped her as they all turned to look at me in interest. I nodded and said, "Yes, a goblin warrior. I'm 16 years old and will be starting the 2nd year of middle school this semester." "Wow," everyone gasped in amazement. Zhao Xiaofeng said, "Why are you still in 2nd grade? You could be enrolled in the academy early." "Exactly, little brother, you must already have Miss-level energy, right? Why not go to the academy sooner and become a professional earlier? Staying in middle school is just a waste of time." Zhao Xiaoxue nodded in agreement. Suyu lightly patted her companions and said with a smile, "Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Goblins are different from your beast companions. As for goblin warriors, their energy density might not be enough to qualify as professionals. Little brother can wait until school starts and ask your teacher or principal about it. Even if you want to enter the academy early, getting a recommendation from the school is the fastest and safest way." I quickly nodded in gratitude, but noticed that both Zhao Xiaofeng and Zhao Xiaoxue also showed expressions of realization. These 2 are quite good-looking, but seem a bit unreliable. After chatting with the Academy's trial adventure team, I learned they had just returned from completing a mission in the Misty Forest and planned to rest at the Adventurers Guild for a couple of days. The Adventurers Guild has guest rooms upstairs that are cheaper than staying at an inn, with additional discounts for Academy students, though they're only available to registered adventurers. Upon hearing I wanted to find simple bounty tasks, Zhao Xiaofeng immediately pointed out some of the lowest level bounties for me, all involving gathering materials or pelts from low-level magical beasts. Most of the bounty tasks posted in the hall were of this type, with no special requirements. Adventurers generally wouldn't go out of their way to complete them. If they happened to have the requested materials on hand, they'd turn them in for some reward money. To get adventurers to make a special trip for bounty missions, the reward had to be exceptionally high, and most were assigned missions. Once someone took the job, no one else could submit it until that person either failed or completed it. Otherwise, adventurers who put in the effort would return only to find the task already completed by someone else, a huge blow to morale that could easily lead to violent incidents over stolen mission items. Of course, not just anyone could take on assigned missions. Besides adventurer rank, there were all sorts of requirements. But that had nothing to do with me for now. I just wanted to earn some extra cash on my way into the misty forest. Taking careful note of the items required for those simple quests, I bid farewell to the student adventurer team with a smile and turned to leave the Adventurers Guild. With plenty of daylight left, I planned to take a stroll around the misty forest. Earlier, while chatting with Suyu and the others, I learned that the recent decrease in adventurers around town was due to the appearance of a massive underground ruin in the desolate stone plains. Most adventurers had flocked there for the excitement and likely wouldn't return to White Moon Town for the next few months. After hearing this news, I felt much more at ease. Every time I summoned a group of goblins to fight, I always worried about being discovered. The next goal is to level up the Goblin Thief. Due to the half the effort, double the results buff currently active, the challenge in upgrading the Goblin Thief isn't about gaining experience, but meeting its specific level up conditions. Make the Goblin Thief attack successfully while in stealth mode 10 times, helping it gain full confidence in its stealth abilities. Progress, 1/10. This doesn't seem too difficult. With proper coordination, letting other goblins distract the enemy, it should be easy to complete. As for the other goblin undergoing evolution, I most want the Frost Goblin to evolve. Elemental attacks are just too good, serving as a trump card for critical moments. Unfortunately, the evolution conditions for the Frost Goblin are a bit tricky. The Frost Goblin needs to master the power of frost before it can evolve further. It will meet the evolution requirements in 53 days, or you can shorten the time by using items imbued with frost energy, such as frost fruits. I've decided to leave it to fate. For now, I'll focus on meeting the evolution requirements for the Goblin Thief. Later, whichever goblin meets the conditions first gets to evolve. After all, each goblin has its own unique uses, so evolving any of them is a win. Familiar with the route, I arrived at the outskirts of the misty forest but didn't rush in. Finding a slime by the river and making sure no one was around, I immediately summoned the Goblin Thief and ordered it to assassinate the slime. The Goblin Thief concealed itself and slowly crept toward the slime, but the light distortion caused by its movement was too obvious. Even the brainless slime sensed something amiss and shifted its attention toward the goblin. I had anticipated this. Picking up a small pebble from the ground, I threw it at the slime to divert its attention toward me. Seizing the opportunity, the Goblin Thief swiftly circled behind the slime and drove its crude wooden spear down with force. Plop! A stream of water gushed from the slime's punctured body before it gradually deflated. Tisk! Why did you have to stab it to death? I had originally planned to repeatedly trigger evolution conditions using a single slime, but the Goblin Thief killed it outright. Yet, as I watched the Goblin Thief's excited expression, perhaps that so-called confidence mattered more than completion? Uncertain, I decided to take the Goblin Thief to seek stronger foes. I recalled the Goblin Thief back into the beast taming space and summoned the Goblin Warrior, then turned to walk deeper into the forest.